Somewhere on the street, a fatty named Jael is getting bullied by a group of boys. They are making him do sit-ups while recording his video on their phone. The bullies think that he looks absolutely disgusting doing those sit-ups. Eventually, Jael gets tired and falls on the ground. That makes one of the bullies angry. He then walks up to Jael and asks him if he really don't want to lose some weight. The bully then grabs a bucket that is full of food waste and says that since he doesn't want to lose weight, they will make him gain weight. The bully then tells Jael to eat whatever it is inside, and Jael continues to eat while tearing up. Seeing that, the bullies start laughing and then start to beat him up even more. Later that night, Jael tries to isekai himself, hoping to dominate the world someday. He then falls on the ground only to realize he resurrected from the death along with the soul of a martial arts fighter. The following day, Jael is actually competing against an opponent inside an MMA ring, and even with his martial arts background, he is getting completely destroyed by the person he is fighting. Jael always had this really strong desire to become the most powerful man who has ever lived, and he believes without any doubt that he is going to get there one day, and this belief has been with him long before he ever finds out about the most interesting weakness that ends up changing the way he sees himself. As it turns out though, Jael has just been dreaming about fighting in the ring, and when he wakes up he starts wondering about the strange situation that has led to him being reincarnated into this current life. He figures out that he is living his everyday life with a second soul that shares the same body as him, and he is able to remember every single little detail from both of those lives, which is something that feels completely crazy and hard to wrap his head around. He then starts thinking about how he has the combined memories of different lifetimes, like the person named Jael from the past who was an experienced martial arts fighter. Later, Jael gets punched hard in the face by the group of bullies who always come after him, a group that has always felt that hitting Jael is way more fun and satisfying than punching an ordinary boxing bag. The bullies get really annoyed when they notice that Jael has somehow managed to take their punch without showing much pain, so they respond by kicking him hard in the head. The other bullies start wondering among themselves why Jael has not passed out after taking that hit to the head, and the fact that Jael just keeps staring directly at the main bully with a hard glare makes that bully even more furious and worked up than he already was. The bully then continues throwing hits at Jael one after another, but none of it seems to have any real effect on Jael's body at all, and eventually the group of bullies makes the decision to just leave and walk away from the whole situation. Right at that moment though, Jael stands up from the ground and gets into a proper fighting stance. He tells the bully to come back and try hitting him one more time if he really wants to. Hearing that, the bully gets completely furious and rushes straight at him with a punch aimed right at his face, and when that punch connects and lands, the bully is completely shocked to see that Jael does not even flinch or react to the hit in any way. After that, Jael suddenly breaks out laughing and then throws a punch straight at the bully. Right at that moment, a status window appears and pops up right in front of Jael, and he gets really excited when he sees it sitting there in front of him. Jael then starts walking toward the other bully, who is standing there scared completely out of his mind. Jael receives a fight mission that requires him to knock out the bully's teeth, and without wasting any time he throws a punch directly into the bully's face and completes the mission just like that. A flashback reveals Jael from the other dimension who used to be a MMA fighter, but because of his opponent using steroids to move his muscles, he ended up losing his fight. Later at hospital, an old man visits Jael and says that this is what he gets for not listening to him. He even mocks Jael and says that because of him his reputation became so much better. It turns out, the press conference that the old geezer gave was quite emotional, and at that conference he said that Jael was capable of being the first Korean fighter to earn the title champion in the WFC. He even said that he should have stopped him from participating in a bare-knuckle fight, and as a punishment, he will take care of Jael. Right at that moment, a whole group of other fighters shows up in the hospital room, and the old man tells all of them to take a good look at their senior, Jael, who is lying there in that condition. The old man then works on manipulating the fighters with his words and manages to take them along with him as he leaves. As for Jael himself though, he is left behind dealing with permanent general paralysis that has been caused by a serious cervical spine injury, and he is barely even holding on to his life at that point. Back in the present, Jael is actually sitting there going through the status window carefully, and as he looks through it he can see that his entire previous life had pretty much nothing in it except for boxing and everything that came along with it. He thinks about how he made so many mistakes throughout that past life of his, but he is not planning on letting any of those same mistakes happen again now that he has been given another chance, especially since he already has much better endurance than before and he knows deep down that he is capable of doing so much better than he ever did. He fully believes that with everything he now knows and everything he now has, he is going to be able to get back the kind of life that he always dreamed about living during his past life, and this time he is not going to let it slip away from him. Just then, a bully shows up in class, looking for Jael. He then walks up to Jail and asks him why he messed up with his friend. It turns out, after Jail dealt with those two bullies, the rumors immediately spread at the school, and because of that, all the thugs lined up to beat Jail. To their surprise, Jail managed to demolish each one of them using his martial arts skills. Later that day, the bullies informed their head that Jail has learned boxing and now all of them were brutally attacked by him. The head bully does not believe what the others are telling him and makes up his mind to go and teach Jail a lesson himself. On the other hand, a red-headed girl who clearly has a bad side to her walks up to Jail and tells him that she thinks it is pretty cool that he knows martial arts. Jail tells her to get out of there because she is literally standing inside the men's bathroom, but she is way too interested and curious about how someone who everyone considered a total loser has suddenly become strong enough to beat up a group of bullies to just walk away like that. She even brings up the idea that if he comes on as a guest on her YouTube channel and shares the whole story of what happened, he could actually end up becoming pretty famous because of it. Jail shuts that idea down right away though and makes it clear that he has zero interest in any of that and that he does not even have the time to stand around talking to girls right now. Deep down inside, what he is really thinking about is how badly he wants to take down Young-gil and keep pushing forward with his martial arts journey. On his way out of the bathroom, Jail suddenly runs right into the head bully himself, who wastes absolutely no time and kicks him right then and there. Right after that, a whole bunch of the other bullies pile into the men's bathroom as well and completely trap the red-headed girl inside. They even go as far as pulling out a video of Jail doing sit-ups and waving it in his face as a way to humiliate in front of the girl. The moment Jail sees what they are doing, he gets completely furious and throws a punch straight into the guy's face. After that, Jail keeps throwing punch after punch at the bully without slowing down at all, and no matter what move the bully tries to use to block or defend himself, absolutely none of it works in his favor. The bully gets completely confused and starts thinking to himself that something is seriously off about this whole situation, because there is just no way that someone could possibly get this strong and this skilled in only a matter of a few days. Jail then carefully positions himself at a distance that is just far enough for him to throw a clean front jab, and he launches it straight into the bully's face. The bully, whose name turns out to be Jusong, keeps taking hit after hit directly to his cheeks while his group of friends standing nearby look at each other and wonder among themselves whether they should actually step in and do something to at least help him out. Jusong eventually manages to grab a hold of Jail and attempts to pull off a judo move on him, but that plan falls completely apart the moment Jail destroys him with a powerful uppercut that stops everything dead in its tracks. Jail then refuses to stop or hold back in any way until he has completely knocked out every single one of Jusong's teeth, leaving him with no choice but to collapse and fall unconscious onto the ground. Jail then lets out an excited yell, making it clear to everyone around him that he has finally managed to complete 30 missions in total. Later that night, the system window informs Jail that he has successfully collected 30 teeth from misbehaving students and that he is now going to be receiving a reward of 20 points for pulling that off. He gets really happy when he sees those points coming in and immediately starts wondering which skill he should put those points toward upgrading. He looks through his available options and spots his wrestling and jiu-jitsu skills, both of which are currently sitting at level F. Jail then thinks back to his past life and reflects on how the single hardest thing he ever had to deal with back then was submission holds, and when it comes to attack and wrestling, he feels like those are areas where he can still manage to hold his own and work through them on his own. However, when it comes to jiu-jitsu specifically, he knows that he basically has no choice but to keep getting attacked and taken advantage of in that area because he simply does not know it well enough to do anything about it. So, with all of that in mind, he makes the decision that in order to truly grow and improve as an MMA fighter, he needs to start learning jiu-jitsu as soon as possible. The moment he upgrades his jiu-jitsu ability, he immediately notices a very real and sudden change happening throughout his entire body, and it makes him genuinely happy and excited about where things are heading. He realizes that all the knowledge and skills he needs are now sitting right there in his mind, and that he is fully capable of performing jiu-jitsu from this point forward. For the time being though, what still remains on Jail's to-do list is losing weight and building up his muscles, so he pushes forward and keeps going with his bodybuilding journey without skipping a beat. Meanwhile, some of the other thugs talks about how all this time Jail hid his strength. One of the scary-looking guys asks Jusong if they should call gangsters to beat him up, but another guy says that there is still no guarantee that they would be able to beat him up. Another guy in the room tells Jusong that he knows a way to bring Jail down. The next day, the same girl from Jail's school approaches him, asking if he is training by himself. She then asks him to star in her YouTube video and explain why fighters let those sounds when they throw punches. Jail straight away refuses her offer, and she can't understand why he is not accepting her offer and working so hard like that. She then asks him if he is going to compete in real fighters. The girl further explains that it is a famous program on YouTube where the winner is going to get 200 million won and an opportunity to enter RFC gym. Seeing that, Jaeol realizes that this is his opportunity to pay back what Jang Young-gil did to him. Before leaving, the girl tells him that Jusung and his boys recorded his video beaten and now they are posting it on internet. Moreover, Jaeol asks the girl for her help and turns out he borrows her YouTube channel because he wants to explain about that viral video. Instead of apologizing to anyone, Jaeol straightaway announced that he is going to beat Jusung even harder than he ever did. Meanwhile, Jusung and the rest of his group are sitting around watching the stream together, and they all seem to think that Jaeol has completely lost his mind at this point. Jusung makes it clear to the others that there is absolutely no reason for any of them to be scared, because as far as he is concerned, the public is fully on their side, and everything is going to be fine. Right at that moment, however, Jaeol shows up together with the red-headed girl, and he makes it very clear that he is not leaving until he has hit Jusung enough times to actually get him to fight back for real. Jaeol then lays out a choice for Jusung and asks him whether he would rather have Jaeol beat him down first until he decides to fight back, or whether he would prefer to just start throwing hits at each other right from the beginning. While all of this is going on, the girl is actually in the middle of a live stream the entire time, and Jaeol takes a moment to tell everyone watching exactly where the whole thing is taking place so that anyone who wants to can come and see it for themselves. Jusung starts thinking about just running away from the whole situation, but Jaeol immediately shuts that idea down by telling him that if he runs, he is just going to chase after him and beat him down anyway no matter where he goes. Jaeol then keeps going and starts mocking both Jusung and his family in a very deliberate way, clearly trying to get him angry enough to stop thinking and just come after him. Jusung eventually reaches his breaking point and gets furious enough to start going after Jaeol, but before things escalate any further, Jaeol holds out a pair of boxing gloves and tells him to put them on before it is too late for him to have any kind of fair chance. Jusung, however, just kicks the gloves away without a second thought, while Jaeol calmly goes ahead and puts his own pair on without any rush. Jaeol then charges at him with a punch straight at his nose. At that moment, the police shows up and Jusung quickly tells them that Jaeol attacked him. Instead of doing something, the police arrests Jusung for producing unethical stuff of minors, but he has no idea what they are talking about. Jaeol then shows him the video that he made of Jaeol doing sit-ups and it all makes sense now. After that, the audience starts cursing Jusung and his whole life is ruined. Jaeol then says that a guy named Malcolm X once said that, he don't call it violence when it's in self-defense, he calls it intelligence. Jaeol explains that he was an outcast and Jusung not only took his money, but he was humiliated almost every day and that is the reason why he learned boxing. Jaeol also makes it clear that he is fully willing to accept whatever kind of punishment comes his way for everything that happened today, but the one thing he wants to make sure everyone understands is that everything he did was purely a form of self-defense to protect himself from people who kept coming after him. He then wraps things up by explaining that the reason he wanted to learn martial arts in the first place was never just about protecting himself, but about being able to go toe-to-toe and exchange punches with people who are far more experienced and skilled than he is, and that is exactly why participating in something called Real Fighter has become such an important goal for him. At that moment, the CEO of Real Fighter and his head secretary are watching everything unfold and both of them find it really strange that not only does the current Jaeol share the exact same name as someone they once knew, but his fighting style also lines up in a way that is hard to just brush off as a coincidence. The CEO starts thinking out loud about the possibility of scouting Jaeol and bringing him in, but the secretary pushes back and points out that Jaeol is still a minor, and that bringing someone like him on board could end up sending the wrong message to middle and high school students who are watching. The CEO, however, brushes that concern aside and tell him simply that the easiest way to make money is to give people exactly what they want to see, and that is all there is to it. A few weeks later, the CEO puts together a contest with the goal of finding a fighter that meets his standards and vision. Surprisingly enough, Jaeol is among those who show up to participate, except this time he is no longer carrying the round fatty belly he used to have and instead shows up with a noticeably handsome face now that he has managed to shed all that weight. The fighting contest begins with a fighter called Wongi showing amazing boxing skills by knocking out his opponent. Seeing that, a reporter thinks that not only he mastered boxing, but he also mastered wrestling and as a striker he has the upper hand. Just then, Mina arrives and sits with the reporters who recognize her as the YouTuber. The male reporter is going crazy Mina and how he is a subscriber of her channel. However, the female reporter gets quite jealous and asks him about it, so he says that she is a beauty YouTuber with 800,000 subscribers. The reporter finds herself wondering what exactly a beauty YouTuber is doing showing up at a martial arts competition of all places, and Mina responds by saying that she has just been getting increasingly interested in rougher things lately. Right at that moment, a massive-looking guy makes his way onto the stage, and the sight of him is enough to make Mina visibly scared and uncomfortable. The reporter fills her in by explaining that this guy used to be a gangster and was a pretty well-known and respected leader within his gang back in the day. The female reporter then thinks to herself that even his application video had not made any sense when she watched it, because what he had done was simply walk straight up to a group of bullies and beat every single one of them down, using the excuse that he was just trying to teach them some kind of lesson. The gangster then goes ahead and completely knocks out his opponent without too much trouble at all, and the CEO comments that this is actually the first time they have ever had a participant come in with such an incredibly high level of fighting spirit. The CEO then goes ahead and makes a public announcement that they are going to be fully supporting this fighter, whose name turns out to be Sukdu, and extends an open invitation for him to come and join their organization. Seeing all of that play out, Mina gets confused and turns to the female reporter to ask whether something like that could really be predicted ahead of time, and the reporter responds by saying that it was honestly pretty obvious from the start given how enormous his fighting spirit clearly was. She also adds that having the gangster title attached to his name is going to do a lot of work in helping the whole story spread and go viral, and that there is simply no way that President Jang is going to let an opportunity like that go to waste. In a flashback, Jaeol gets his last task in the system window, and this might be harder than collecting the bully's teeth. Jaeol then tells his father that he wants to be a martial arts fighter, and his father gets surprised to hear that he has been interested in playing martial arts game lately. He says that he doesn't earn much, but he can let him do that. Jaeol however makes it clear to his dad that he is not talking about video games or anything like that, but actual real fighting, and hearing that causes his dad to get genuinely worried as he asks Jaeol if everything is alright with him. Jaeol then calmly explains to his dad that his son has figured out something that he truly wants to do with himself, and that he is simply coming to him now to let him know about it. In the end, Jaeol's dad takes it all in and tells him that he can go ahead and do whatever it is that he wants to do, and that he is genuinely proud of him for finding something that he actually cares about and wants to pursue. Back in the present, it is now Jaeol's turn to step up and show everyone what he is made of, so he makes his way toward the ring. His opponent then brings up the fact that he has already gone through and watched Jaeol's application video, and that this video makes it pretty obvious just how confident Jaeol is when it comes to his boxing abilities. Jaeol looks at this fighter and quickly realizes that this guy is nothing more than one of the CEO's puppets who has been sent in for a specific reason. In a flashback that pulls back to the other life, when the Jaeol from that previous lifetime was lying in the hospital, this same fighter had actually shown up there just to mock and look down on him. The fighter had made fun of Jaeol for refusing to listen to the CEO and pointed out that his stubbornness was exactly what had landed him in such a terrible situation in the first place. Furthermore, the fight starts off with Jaeol's opponent throwing a jab, but Jaeol dodges it instantly. He then continues to throw punches at Jaeol as soon as the bell rang, but Jaeol is avoiding them swiftly. The opponent realizes that he is very similar to the Jaeol he remembers. Jaeol then gets closer to the cage, so the opponent thinks now is the time for him to do something, but before he could, he gets punched by Jaeol. After all of that, the opponent gets completely furious and charges straight at Jaeol with everything he has, but before he is actually able to do anything meaningful, the bell rings and brings the whole thing to a stop. During the break between rounds, Jaeol sits there thinking to himself that it is a real shame thing ended when they did, because he feels like he could have easily racked up some solid points if he had just gotten the chance to finish off that loser properly. On the other side of things, the opponent's coach is getting in his face and telling him that he needs to start using his feet a lot more, and he does not hold back at all as he starts calling him an outright idiot for walking in there with such an arrogant attitude. The coach then shifts his attention over to Jaeol and starts thinking to himself that newcomers in general are simply not capable of reacting as quickly as Jaeol just did out there, which tells him that Jaeol is clearly someone who has picked up a decent amount of real experience somewhere along the way. The second round then gets going, and things start off with the opponent putting a serious beating on Jaeol by making heavy use of the clinch technique that is commonly associated with dirty boxing. As it turns out, in a standard boxing competition a move like that would be considered a foul and would not be allowed, but since this is an MMA fight, it actually counts as a perfectly reasonable and smart strategy to lean on. The opponent then gets right in Jaeol's face and asks him how he is feeling about all of this, and whether any of what is happening right now is bringing back some memories from the old days. The opponent further thinks that he will slowly go down as he is a pathetic high schooler who doesn't have any experiences with this. At that moment, Jaeol punches him with a river blow that hits his ribs. After that, the opponent attempts to throw a punch aimed at the right side of Jaeol's face, but Jaeol reads it coming and smoothly dodges it by shifting over to the left side. Jaeol then wastes absolutely no time and fires back with a series of punches that send the opponent stumbling backwards all the way into the cage with nowhere left to go. Jaeol then charges straight toward him to keep the pressure going, but the opponent gets furious and launches a long-reaching punch in his direction to try and stop him in his tracks. Jaeol however manages to dodge that one as well and follows it up immediately by knocking the opponent clean out with a powerful uppercut that ends things right then and there. In a flashback that pulls things back to an earlier time, the opponent had been told by some guy to go and fetch some supplements and bring them over, which hit his ego hard and left him feeling seriously disrespected. Wanting to do something about that feeling, he challenges that same guy to a sparring session, where he then proceeds to beat him down repeatedly without letting up at all. The boy eventually starts begging him to stop, but the opponent pays absolutely no attention to that and just keeps going, continuing to put him through a genuinely painful and one-sided experience. Right at that moment, another guy shows up out of nowhere and calmly asks the opponent whether this is how he goes about training his juniors. The opponent brushes it off and tells the guy that the other person was the one who asked to spar with him in the first place, so as far as he is concerned that is all the justification he needs for what happened. Jaeol then steps forward and tells the opponent directly that if he is really that eager to spar with someone, then he should come and spar with him instead. During their sparring, Jaeol knocks him out with the same uppercut that he did in the present time. Back in present, the opponent thinks that this guy looks exactly like that Jaeol and thinks that everyone here must have not expected this kind of an outcome. He believes that everything he does from movement, feint and coping ability is more than just an amateur. Jaeol continues to beat the opponent with various tricks which annoys the opponent, so he holds Jaeol in order to slam him on the ground. However, before he could do something like that, Jaeol uses jujitsu technique to hold on to his neck, surprising everyone. After that, Jaeol smashes his opponent on the ground with a guillotine choke that surprises everyone because they knew he was good at boxing but turns out he had a secret weapon as well. The female reporter asks the male if what they are watching is actually real as it was little clumsy technique, but the grip was complete. The male reporter then reveals that he filmed this secretly, so they won't get into a problem. Meanwhile, the opponent player is having a hard time, and he keeps on thinking that he can't lose this match. Just then, the referee stops the match and Jaeol proved the expectations wrong as he managed to beat Fight Wang Ji. The next day, Jaeol continues with his training, thinking he passed the qualification stage and now it's time for the finals. He thinks that he got even more annoyed cause of that hateful CEO. Earlier, the CEO gave a speech in which he said that it was a surprising turn of event as Jaeol managed to do boxing, feint and then spontaneous submission. Jaeol tells him that it's the result of his practice and effort to enter RFC. The CEO also says that while watching him, it reminded him of his old days and says that as everybody knows about the late Jaeol who was a fighter that he doted on a lot. The CEO then goes further and says that he should have stepped in and stopped the late Jaeol from ever participating in a no-weight class competition in the first place, and now that man is gone and all that remains is the legacy he left behind. But the way things are looking right now, the CEO cannot help but feel like a brand new Jaeol has shown up to take his place. Back in the present, Jaeol thinks to himself that he needs to stay careful and not get ahead of himself, reminding himself that for the time being the only thing that truly matters is keeping his head down and preparing as thoroughly as possible for the finals that are coming up. He then takes a moment to reflect on how the points he managed to earn from his match against 1GI turned out to be just enough for him to push his jiu-jitsu skill all the way up to AD ranking, and that feels like a genuinely meaningful step forward in the right direction. He then goes ahead and pulls up his status window, taking his time to carefully look through everything that is sitting there in front of him, and he comes to the conclusion that the next big thing he really needs to pour his energy into is getting his physical abilities upgraded and sharpened up so that they actually match and complement the skills he has already built up to this point. Right at that moment, the same female journalist who had shown up the day before walks over and introduces herself to him as Hyaman. She tells him that she went back and rewatched his match quite a few times after it ended, and she asks him directly whether the submission move he pulled off at the end was something he had specifically planned and prepared for ahead of time. Jaeol however makes it clear that this is his training time right now and that he needs to get to it, so Hyaman quickly jumps in and tells him that she only needs him to answer just one short question before he goes. She then asks him whether he has anyone particular in mind that he would want as a mentor going into the final match. Sometime later, Hyaman makes her way back to the office and fills in another guy on the situation by letting him know that Jaeol completely avoided giving her any kind of answer to that question. Even so, the guy says that in the competition of the Real Fighter Final Team, players must choose among 2 members and 5 against 5 team, categorized based on weight class. He also says that all of them will try to go for best mentors but only the good fighters will be picked by Daegun. The next day, Jaeol chooses mentor Jinsu that surprises everyone. Seeing that, the head asks CEO what to do as there are no journalists, they can do selection process over again. But the CEO says that it's too hard to do that now and everyone is going to go crazy. Later that night, Jael watches the RFC show and realizes that they cut out his parts. The next day, Jael contacts Hyaman for help regarding him being edited out. The journalists use their secret videotape in which Jael did the submission and post online as a proof that RFC fabricated the broadcast. At the same time, the CEO of RFC is getting furious, but his fellow man asks him if they should inform them that 1GI requested the malicious editing. The CEO says that it would backfire, and they should not say anything for now. The next day, everyone at school is surprised to see Jael's new transformation from being a bullied loser to a guy who even went to the real fighting contest. The girls in Jael's class also starts asking him out with every opportunity they get, but Jael just straight away tells them that it's his workout day. The girls don't leave him and asks him if he want to go tomorrow, but he again says that he will train legs and the day after tomorrow he has shoulders workout. Mina then approaches Jael and asks him if he doesn't like hanging out with the other kids. However, Jael says that they were nowhere to be found when he was outcast and they are giving him attention because he got a bit famous. Later that day, Jael is training alongside his mentor Jinsu, and he comes clean by telling him that everything he knows about boxing actually came from the late Jael, and that he had been lying the whole time when he claimed he did not know who that person was. Jinsu takes that in and thinks to himself that the late Jael has finally left something behind that truly counts as a legacy, and that legacy is the very pair of fists that the current Jael is now using in the ring. Jael then keeps going and adds that the late Jael had specifically told him that he would be forever grateful to Jinsu for everything he had done for him throughout his life. He continues on and shares that the late Jael had made it a point to tell him that Jinsu was the only person who ever really stepped up and helped him during the times when he was genuinely struggling and had nowhere else to turn, and that he had gone as far as personally paying for his medical bills when he ended up getting seriously injured, and had even opened up his own home and let him stay there during the times when Jael had absolutely no place to go. Hearing all of that being laid out in front of him causes Coach Jinsu to get completely emotional, and he finds himself apologizing to Jael from a place of deep regret. He explains that if he had simply been a better fighter back in those days, they would have had much stronger and more capable fighters representing their team as well, and he also mentions that he had heard about how the opposing team had been continuously showing up at their gym and giving them a really hard time. Soon, the RFC Fighters Cultivation Project begins with a final broadcast. There are lots of people in the stadium desperately trying to see the fighters fight. The commentator makes the announcement that there are two teams who are about to go up against each other, and one of those teams belongs to Daegun, which is described as being overwhelmingly powerful and stacked with talent, while as for Jael, who has gone ahead and chosen to side with Jinsu's team, the commentator expresses that everyone is genuinely excited and curious to see whether he is going to be able to keep his winning streak alive. At that very same moment, the CEO gets a really uneasy feeling about how things are shaping up and starts thinking to himself that the way things are looking right now, Daejeon's team should comfortably come out on top when all is said and done. He then steps forward and picks up the mic in order to pay his respects to both teams before things get underway. After that is done, it becomes Jael's turn to speak, and he reaches out and grabs the mic before making it clear that he has a specific request he wants to put forward right then and there. He says that what he would like to do is completely change the structure of the match by taking on the entire opposing team completely by himself without any help from anyone else. Hearing those words come out of his mouth, absolutely everyone in the room gets completely shocked by what they are hearing, and the commentator immediately starts trying to get his mic cut off before he can say anything else. The CEO, however, steps in and tells everyone to let him keep talking and finish what he has to say. Jael then goes on to explain that the reason behind his request is that his team simply is not ready to step into the octagon just yet, and the last thing he wants to do is ruin the program by putting them out there before their time, so he is going to go out there and perform on behalf of every single one of them himself. The moment those words land, the entire audience absolutely erupts and starts cheering loudly for Jael from every corner of the room. The CEO then tells Jael that if he is going to do this, he is going to have to get through all 5 rounds at 3 minutes each, but Jael does not even blink and fires back by saying that he is going to wrap the whole thing up well before that time even runs out. Jael's system status window pops up and shows him that he is supposed to come out as the winner of the finals, meaning he is expected to win the final match, and in return for doing so he is going to receive a reward of 50 points. Jael thinks to himself that under normal circumstances he would have been perfectly happy stopping at 50 points, but now that the rules of the situation have changed, he is actually going to be earning 50 points for every single person he beats rather than just a flat total. Jael's match then gets underway, and he comes out of the gate beating his very first opponent so quickly and so efficiently that the opponent is completely unable to keep up with the pace that Jael is setting from the very beginning. Watching all of this happen, the others start thinking among themselves that Jael must have gotten significantly stronger since the last time they saw him, especially since they cannot spot even the smallest trace of excess flab anywhere on his body anymore. Jael then goes ahead and knocks out his very first opponent in a mere 30 seconds, making the whole thing look almost effortless from start to finish. Everyone watching then starts talking about how Jael's boxing skills are operating on a completely different level from everyone else out there, and they find themselves curious about whether there is a single participant left in the competition who is actually going to be capable of finding a way out of that punch. Next up, it is Youngpyo's turn to step in and fight, and pretty much everyone watching through the broadcast chat is saying that Youngpyo is exactly the kind of person who is built to win, and that his overall skill set is more than capable of going toe-to-toe with what Jael brings to the table. Hyaman turns to her partner and confirms that what the people in the chat are saying actually holds a lot of truth to it, explaining that the most important foundation of wrestling comes down to defense, and that the really critical part of it all is knowing how to watch out for and respond to any incoming tackle attempts. The male journalist then brings up the question of whether it is genuinely difficult to try and stop those kinds of moves using nothing but their fists, and Hyaman tells him that it absolutely is, because the low tackles come in at such a downward angle that it becomes really hard to figure out exactly where to aim a punch in order to stop them effectively. The match then continues as Youngpyo charges straight at Jael with everything he has, but Jael reads it perfectly and shuts it down cleanly with a well-timed kick. Youngpyo is now visibly hesitating and second-guessing himself after absorbing that calf kick and feeling the effect it has on his leg. Jael then goes right back to the exact same spot and lands another kick in the very same place, which frustrates Youngpyo to the point where he feels like he has to do something different to change the situation, but the moment he tries to make a move he walks straight into a punch that lands flush on his face. Just like that, the second match also ends in a knockout, and it happens in well under 30 seconds from start to finish. The guy in a black suit thinks that he was aware of Jael's boxing skill, but a kick was quite surprising. He thinks that using only boxing, he won against a wrestler and jujitero, which is like impossible. A man in a black suit then pulls aside a fighter named Ilju, who is the next one scheduled to go in, and tells him to make sure he keeps his guards up at all times and stays fully conscious and aware of whatever his opponent is throwing at him. After that, the karate champion Ilju makes his way into the octagon with his guard already raised and begins carefully approaching Jael in a measured and calculated way. Right at that moment, however, Jael throws a punch so devastatingly hard directly into his ribs that it actually ends up breaking the bones on impact, and Ilju immediately crumbles and falls straight to the ground from the force of it. Hyaman then comments that now that things have reached this point, Daegun is going to be sitting back and working through thousands of different ways to try and find an attack strategy that will finally work against Jael. Next, a fighter by the name of Jihan steps into the octagon, and out of everyone who has participated so far, he stands out as the one with the most genuinely impressive grappling skills of the bunch. Jihan wastes no time and charges straight toward Jael, but instead of connecting he ends up on the receiving end of a kick that stops him cold. He then tries a second time to go after Jael's leg and get a hold of it, but Jael reads the attempt, avoids it cleanly, and follows up with another kick that lands hard. After that, Jael moves in and gets on top of him, then begins raining down repeated punches without letting up. Despite all of that, Jihan somehow manages to work things around and gets Jael down on the ground, then locks onto his neck with a tight grip. But before Jihan even gets the chance to throw a single punch from that position, Jael immediately pulls off a triangle choke in what feels like the blink of an eye and turns the whole situation completely around. In the end, Jael manages to defeat Jihan as well, and now there is only a single opponent standing between him and finishing the whole thing off completely. Meanwhile, the CEO sits back and thinks to himself that the only reason he even allowed the rule change to happen in the first place was for the sake of making the show more entertaining and fun to watch, but at the rate things are going right now, Jael is well on his way to turning into a brand new star that nobody saw coming. He finds it genuinely hard to believe that he is now sitting here having to put the entire fate of their show in the hands of that pathetic gangster who is clearly just out there desperately seeking attention and validation from everyone sitting in the stadium. On the other side, the male journalist turns to Hyaman and asks her straight up whether she actually thinks Jael has what it takes to come out on top this time. She responds by saying that she genuinely believes he is going to lose this matchup, pointing out that he has already burned through a significant amount of energy across the 4 matches he has already fought through to get here. She also brings up the fact that the two of them are operating in completely different weight classes, and makes the point that if Sukdu manages to close the distance and get in close enough to start attacking, there is really not going to be much of a window left for Jael to do anything about it. The male journalist however pushes back a little and brings up the fact that Jael has that iron punch in his arsenal, which makes it genuinely difficult for anyone trying to get close to him to actually find the right moment to do so safely. The match then gets started with the gangster immediately charging straight at Jael and launching a knee strike right at him, but Jael reads it and dodges out of the way without much trouble. The gangster however is not the type to back off after just one failed attempt and keeps pushing forward, continuing to throw attacks at Jael one after another without showing any sign of letting up. Everyone wonders if Jael's stamina has gone down after 4 matches. Jael himself thinks that his steps are becoming dull and he shouldn't recklessly move too much or else he is going to run out of energy faster. Jael then decides to use a completely different punch technique from boxing, and it's not easy to do the parry technique using open finger gloves. The gangster continues to throw punches at Jael, but he dodges them and hits him with a strike directly in his chest. After that, Jael punches the gangster straight in the face and he just doesn't stop with one punch. It turns out, the gangster always thought that no matter how good someone's skills are, when their heart skips a beat they lose everything. In a flashback that pulls things back to an earlier moment, the gangster's coach had been sitting there thinking to himself that his fighter is more than ready enough to step into a real fight and that he is going to walk away with a win against Jinsu without too much difficulty at all. The gangster had responded with full confidence, saying that everything he has built up and everything he knows how to do is all thanks to what he learned from their Daejeon, and he made it clear that he is not going into this with even a single doubt in his mind. Back in the present, Jael keeps landing clean and precise hits one after another, stringing together a really impressive consecutive attack sequence all within that tight and uncomfortable close range. The gangster ends up getting pushed back and taken all the way to the cage without much ability to stop it from happening, but he manages to pull himself together mentally and thinks to himself that there is absolutely no way he is going to let himself lose this fight. He then reaches out and grabs a hold of Jael's hair and attempts to pull off a move that is completely illegal in the context of the match, but Jael responds immediately by breaking his fingers before he can follow through with anything. In the end, Jael completely dismantles and destroys the gangster right there inside the octagon, and even during the moments where his stamina is clearly working against him and putting him at a disadvantage, he keeps his composure and brings the match to a calm and controlled finish. After everything is over, the CEO steps up to the mic and offers Jael his congratulations, though it is painfully obvious to everyone watching that he is doing so completely against his own will. Jael then reaches out and takes the mic for himself and drops a major announcement, revealing that he wants to formally propose a match against mentor Daejeon himself, explaining that Daejeon had previously dismissed his wins as nothing more than luck and that he now wants to step up and prove beyond any doubt that his skills are completely real. After that, the crowd starts cheering even louder and mentor Daejeon asks the CEO if he could go and fight him. The CEO says that this is a beneficial situation for him because if it ends like this then Jael is going to get all the credit, but if RFC's very own champion Daejeon beat him up then it will be good. He thinks that Daejeon's level is far different and he will be able to win and retrieve RFC's reputation. The CEO then picks up the mic and says that he will allow full contact in this match with 3 minutes and 2 rounds. Daejeon then removes his clothes and enters the octagon where he gets mocked by Jael. The match starts off with Daejeon charging at Jael and gives him pressure through a takedown but then attacks him as well. Seeing that, journalist asks Hyman if that is allowed and she says that it's allowed and Jael has to match his opponent's level. Seeing that, the journalist thinks to himself that if this keeps going in the same direction, Jael is going to end up losing by a submission finish before he even gets the chance to turn things around. Hyman then chimes in and says that Daejeon is going to keep pounding away at Jael relentlessly, not giving him even the tiniest window to catch his breath or reset himself in any meaningful way. Daejeon then grabs Jael and slams him hard down onto the ground, and from there he immediately goes ahead and locks in the knee on belly technique, making things incredibly uncomfortable and painful for Jael to deal with from that position. Daejeon then leans in and tells Jael directly that his wrestling skills are honestly pretty dull, but right in the middle of saying that, Daejeon finds himself genuinely surprised when he looks down and sees that Jael's eyes are still completely locked onto him. Jael then pushes forward and manages to pull off an armbar escape that gets him out of the bad position he was in, and he immediately tries to follow that up by throwing a hit at Daejeon, but Daejeon is too experienced to let that slide and quickly works his way back to the top position and starts hitting Jael all over again. Watching all of this unfold from the sidelines, a guy sitting in a suit starts wondering out loud just how far Daejeon is planning to take this attack, pointing out that at the end of the day Jael is still just a high school student who is in there with a seasoned veteran. After all of that, the first round finally comes to an end, and the general feeling among pretty much everyone watching is that Daejeon was the one clearly dominating and controlling things throughout the entire round from start to finish. After that, the bell rings and the second round officially gets underway. Everyone watching is now sitting on the edge of their seats wondering how this round is going to play out, especially given the fact that Daejeon's overwhelming skill set had Jaeol thoroughly dominated throughout the entirety of the first round. In addition to that, most people are expecting this round to end up being controlled by wrestling just as much as the last one was. Daejeon thinks to himself that Jaeol is clearly already familiar with how takedowns work, and considering the feint that Jaeol pulled off earlier, he is willing to give him the credit he deserves for how genuinely impressive his punching skills have turned out to be. He then thinks further and concludes that there is a high chance that he is going to get countered if he goes ahead and tries to use the exact same takedown technique that he has already shown Jaeol once before. Because of that, he decides that he really needs to put a lot more serious thought into how he sets up his tackle approach this time around, and he opens things up by coming at Jaeol with a jab to try and create an opening. Jaeol however responds by throwing a hook using his front hand and blowing right through the attempt before it can lead anywhere. Daejeon then comes charging at Jaeol once again with another tackle attempt, but this time around Jaeol is actually ready for it and defends against the incoming tackle by using a spiral move that takes Daejeon completely by surprise. It turns out, the spiral move worked and everyone including Daejeon thinks that it is some impressive athletic ability. Daejeon decides not to change his strategy and still pressure him by wrestling, and Jaeol once again blocked it again using the sprawl movement. Just then, Jaeol punches him straight in the face and the crowd gets more energized than before. After that, Jaeol continues punching Daejeon, who raises both of his hands to block. The journalists also take note of the fact that Daejeon's tackle attempts are starting to fall apart, as Jaeol has already managed to successfully block two of them without too much trouble. Hyman then says that the entire direction of the match is about to shift from this point forward, explaining that the one thing Jaeol needed more than anything else was enough distance between himself and his opponent to actually set up and launch his attacks properly, and he has finally gotten exactly that. Jaeol then keeps working and continues to land calf kicks on Daejeon one after another, but deep down inside he is fully aware that his stamina is running dangerously low at this point, which means he needs to find a way to wrap this whole thing up in one decisive go rather than letting it drag on any further. Some of the people scattered throughout the crowd then start openly mocking and humiliating Daejeon in a pretty harsh way, and that only makes him even more furious and wound up than he already is. He starts wondering to himself whether he is really about to end up looking like a pathetic and embarrassing loser in front of everyone just because he cannot put away a tiny high schooler like Jaeol. Right at that moment, Jaeol comes charging forward, thinking to himself that it is not going to make much of a difference even if Daejeon happens to be solid at defensive wrestling, because no matter how many times he drops into a sprawl, the moment Jaeol manages to pull off the sweep it is all going to be completely over for him. Instead of grabbing him, Daejeon throws a sudden uppercut that Jaeol managed to avoid, and with that he throws a straight punch. However, Jaeol managed to dodge it by rotating around and then immediately kicks Daejeon. In a flashback, the late Jaeol was practicing this same back kick in the gym when his coach told him to stop doing that because it's hard to do huge movements in MMA. Jaeol straight away told him that he can approach with a punch setup, but when the opponent nears him with a punch, he can try to match the timing. Back in present, Daejeon notices that one of Jaeol's legs is not moving, so he must be nearing his limit. Daejeon then gets furious and charges at Jaeol with a punch, but before he could hit him, the second round comes to an end. Finally, Jaeol completes his mission, and RFC gets their new rising star. The following day, Jaeol receives a new challenge mission from the system, saying he should knock out an opponent. However, the attempt cost is 300 points, and as a reward he is going to get skill update. Jaeol thinks that it's an amazing opportunity as skills from the system are merely theoretical and there's a huge difference in knowing them theoretically versus practically. After that, Jaeol gets teleported to the virtual world where he is in an octagon going against a C-level MMA fighter. It turns out, Jaeol's opponent is the exact clone of himself. During the battle, Jaeol notices that even though he looks like him, his fighting style is certainly pretty different. Unlike Jaeol, whose area of expertise is boxing, he is an all-rounder who is good at everything. Jaeol tries to use whatever moves he could but still ends up getting demolished by his clone. Jaeol thinks that it wouldn't be effective if he only focus on strong skills, as he needs to polish his weaknesses as well. Eventually, Jaeol ends up losing his first challenge mission, and now he has only 29 attempts to do. The next day at school, Jaeol sits there thinking deeply about his virtual fight and trying to figure out what the problem could have possibly been during that session. He thinks back and concludes that even though he successfully landed kicks twice during the third round, both of them ended up being completely useless and did not make any real difference to how things played out. After working through that in his head, Jael goes ahead and dives back into the virtual world to put in some more attempts and try to figure things out through repetition, and just like that he ends up losing all 15 matches in a row without managing to pull off a single win. Jael then starts thinking about how the system breaks everything down and separates all the techniques into 4 distinct categories, those being punch, kick, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu. However, he then realizes that in an actual MMA fight, those skills do not just sit in their own separate boxes but instead work together in a flowing cycle that keeps shifting and changing, where an attack comes first and then leads into wrestling, and then wrestling flows into jiu-jitsu, and then jiu-jitsu opens the door back up for another attack to come through. Jael then notices that his skill level has actually gone up and gotten an upgrade at some point along the way, and he uses that realization as motivation to keep pushing forward and continues fighting against the clone all the way until he reaches his 30th attempt. In that final 30th attempt, he manages to bring the clone down to the ground with a tackle and follows through well enough to successfully complete the mission. The system gives him all sorts of rewards, but when it's time for hidden reward, it says that there are 2 more missions left until he acquire the hidden reward. It turns out, Jael got too much excited in his class, and so the class teacher got furious at him and kicks him out. Outside, Jael is serving out his punishment by holding himself up against the wall in a really uncomfortable position, and while he is stuck there he is thinking to himself that he has to keep updating and improving his skills on a constant and ongoing basis if he wants to keep moving forward. Later that night, Jael sits down and meets with the RFC CEO, who brings up a particular saying that his father had once shared with him back when he was still far too young to really grasp what it meant. He tells Jael that now that he is getting older and has lived through more of life, he is finally starting to understand what his father was actually trying to say to him back then. The CEO then reaches out and grabs a katana sword and goes ahead and slices his own hand with it, making the point that family does not always have to come down to sharing the same blood as someone else. Jael picks up on what the CEO is getting at and figures out that despite all the power and influence that comes attached to his title, what he is really trying to do is step into more of a father figure role in Jael's life. Jael however responds by apologizing to him in a straightforward way and making it clear that his actual father is still very much alive and well, and that he really does not see any kind of need or reason to have 2 fathers in his life. After that, Jael does not hold back and continues on by openly mocking the CEO, letting him know that he is fully aware of exactly how he operates and how he goes about drawing up contracts that are built around money and power as a way to take advantage of and fool the fighters who sign them. The following day, Jael shows up at the RFC gym now that he has gone ahead and signed the contract, and as he looks around and takes everything in he realizes that this place is going to give him the opportunity to rack up a seriously impressive number of knockouts. In a flashback from the other night, Jael had sat down with the CEO and told him directly that he is fully aware of just how badly he has been treating his fighters, and that the way he handles them is exactly what has made it possible for him to put together a contract as manipulative and one-sided as the one he is presenting. Hearing those words come out of Jael's mouth, the CEO breaks out into laughter and admits that he had genuinely underestimated him, but that it is now clear that there is actually quite a bit of intelligence working behind the scenes inside that head of his. Jael responds by saying that being smart is something he considers necessary if he wants to be able to fight at a high level, because the 2 things go hand in hand as far as he is concerned. The CEO then lays out his perspective and says that the reason he treats his fighters the way he does is actually pretty straightforward when you think about it, explaining that RFC is the only stage out there that is genuinely willing to take these fighters in and give them a platform to perform on, and that even though the contract might look completely unfair from the outside looking in, what RFC actually represents to these fighters is an enormous opportunity that they would not have anywhere else, and that if they keep performing well and making a strong impression, they already know that their renewed contract is going to come with much better offers and far better treatment than what they are getting right now. He also points out that the current champions who are sitting at the top right now, names like Daejeon, Pilsong, Kongju, Ibrahim, and Inoue, all had to go through this exact same step before they ever became the stars that everyone now recognizes them as. Jael however sits with that information and thinks to himself that the reason those fighters went along with it must be because they simply did not have enough confidence in themselves to go out and take on a bigger and more competitive stage, and so they ended up perfectly content with playing the role of puppets on a much smaller one instead. The CEO then gets angry and asks Jael what he wants and asks if he want him to increase his fight money, reduce his contract period or a personal sponsor's allowance. Jael says that there is only one thing he wants and that is to revise the proportion of PPV bonus per match. It turns out, PPV is a subscription that allows subscribers to purchase movies or shows individually, and it is a kind of pay-per-use broadcasting service. In addition to that, PPV sale is the main reason behind RFC's successful revenue model. The CEO thinks that he is requesting something that even Daejian and Kongju was not brave enough to request. Back in present, Jaeol thinks that he had no intention of bonding with the others in the first place, but it's obvious that they all hate him now. The training starts off with lots of exercises, and everyone is surprised to see that Jaeol doesn't look tired at all in any of the training. The training then stops and Wongi tells everyone that since Jaeol joined them they need to hold a welcome match. Wongi then says that they will start with MMA rule, 1 round 2 minutes. Earlier, the boys gathered together in the gym and came up with a plan for when Jaeol eventually shows up, deciding that they are going to open things up with some warming up exercises as a way to drain his energy right from the start, and then shift their focus toward keeping him in close range and attacking him from there consistently. However, one of the guys adds on to the plan by pointing out that once Jaeol finds himself in a situation where his stamina is running low, he is going to have a really hard time avoiding the constant pressure being put on him, because maintaining a solid and reliable connection becomes a serious struggle for him the moment his energy starts to dip. Back in the present, Jaeol thinks to himself that these guys have clearly done their homework and have managed to identify and analyze the exact weaknesses that he put on display during his time on Real Fighter, and he acknowledges that no matter how well he performed there, the honest truth of the matter is that none of the opponents he faced during that competition were professional fighters in any real sense of the word, they were just ordinary everyday people who happened to show up. He also thinks about how the fighters standing in front of him right now are a completely different story, because these are people who push themselves through brutal and demanding training sessions on a daily basis, and that alone puts them on an entirely different level compared to every single opponent he has gone up against before this point. Jaeol's first opponent, a fighter named Sanghyuk, steps into the ring and immediately starts throwing punches at him right out of the gate without any hesitation at all. Jaeol however reads everything coming at him and dodges it all cleanly before firing back with a well-timed knee strike that connects hard. Jaeol then follows that up by throwing Sanghyuk down to the ground and proceeds to beat him down steadily until he comes away with the win. Next up it is Soohyun's turn to step in, and he is clearly excited and fired up at the prospect of getting to face Jaeol directly. Soohyun charges at Jaeol with a back spin elbow strike as soon as they started the round. Jaeol knew that he was going to get played, but he thinks that this is just way too much. Soohyun decides to constantly attack him, but before he could do anything, Jaeol just tries to slam him on the ground. Soohyun gives his best to stop there and Jaeol doesn't give up and attacks Soohyun with punches. Soohyun gets mad and thinks that Jaeol's linking is bad and he cannot predict his moves. He also thinks that Jaeol is completely different from what they analyzed last week. Soohyun then tries to punch Jaeol, but it doesn't work, and in return, Jaeol hits him in his knee and does an armbar. Soohyun tries his best to escape from the armbar, but it doesn't work as Jaeol changes his grip to the omoplata, which is a submission skill from the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. In the end, Soohyun ends up tapping out and Jaeol wins the match. He then tells everyone to get up here in the ring and try if they could actually face him. Although no one said it explicitly, everyone in the gym would agree that Jaeol is now a whole different person from when he was on Real Fighter. The person who is going to understand and appreciate what is happening more than anyone else there is Wongi, who has already had the experience of going up against Jaeol firsthand at least once before. Right at that moment, a guy named Namhyun steps forward from the group and announces that he is the one who is going to go ahead and fight Jaeol next. Wongi looks at him and asks whether he genuinely thinks he has what it takes to do that, pointing out that he can see with his own eyes that people who are ranked above Namhyun in terms of skill and experience have already stepped up and come away with a loss. Namhyun responds by saying that he cannot speak for anything else outside of his own specialty, but when it comes to boxing specifically he is completely confident that he is not going to lose to anyone standing in front of him. Namhyun then steps into the ring and gets right in Jaeol's face, telling him straight up that he is absolutely certain that whatever boxing skills Jaeol has are nowhere close to being on the same level as his own. Hearing that come out of Namhyun's mouth, Jaeol just smiles back at him and tells him casually that they should go ahead and do some boxing then and let things sort themselves out from there. Namhyun then gets completely shocked when he looks over and sees that Jaeol is standing there doing a shoulder roll, especially since the shoulder roll stance is the kind of thing that is typically only brought out when someone is sparring against beginner-level opponents who do not pose much of a real threat. After taking that in, Namhyun shakes it off and charges straight at Jaeol with a punch aimed right at him, but Jaeol does not even flinch and just knocks him out cleanly with a single uppercut that ends things before they even really get started. Jaeol then thinks to himself that the whole exchange felt like a nice little rest, and that now he can go ahead and dial his tension back up and get himself properly ready and locked in for whoever is coming next. Wongi then pulls aside a guy named Hyejin and tells him to just throw absolutely everything he has at Jaeol, every method and every skill in his arsenal, without holding anything back at all. Jael, however, does not waste any time and goes straight at Hyejin with a punch right from the very start, but then finds himself genuinely caught off guard when Hyejin responds by pulling out an oblique kick that is specifically designed to target the inside of the opponent's thigh and disrupt their footing and balance from below. After getting the oblique kick set up and established, Hyejin then goes for a feint to throw Jael off his reading, and it works well enough for him to follow through and land a kick that connects straight up on Jael with solid force. Hyejin then attempts to follow that up by going for a two-finger poke aimed at Jael's eyes, but the move does not land the way he intended, and he ends up just hitting him across the face instead. Hyejin then jumps at Jael while the others ask Hwanggi what they should do. Hwanggi tells him that Hyejin has a good control with his lower body, and he cannot attack in that position. After that, Jael just slams Hyejin on the ground that makes others furious. The boys then enter the ring and ask Jael how he dare do the slam in a sparring session. Jael then gets furious and almost breaks the boy's arm, asking why he is not allowed to do that. In the world of martial arts, when a fighter says that someone has gotten an estimation from them, that means they are able to look at the way their opponent fights and see an enormous amount of potential in them even from that alone. This kind of recognition can happen even when the fighter in question has not shown all that much yet, and it really comes down to just how completely dominating they look in the matches. Sometimes people in the sport refer to a certain fighter as being champion-worthy, and a good example of the kind of physical and punching power that goes beyond what a normal person is capable of would be someone like Francis Ngannou. On top of that, there are also fighters who stand out because of an incredibly short match history combined with an overwhelming chain of wrestling and grappling skills, and a fighter like Khamzat Chimaev is a solid example of exactly that kind of profile. So, when it comes to how Hwanggi sees Jael, Jael is essentially his estimation, the fighter he looks at and immediately recognizes as something special and worth paying very close attention to. Hwanggi sits alone in his room turning things over in his head, thinking about just how impressive Jael really is as a fighter and reflecting on how he managed to put together such a genuinely strong and memorable performance throughout his time on Real Fighter. As it turns out, there is actually a pretty solid reason behind why Hwanggi feels so certain about Jael's ability, and that is because he himself has already gone up against fighters from serious organizations including those competing out of the CSOF and WFC, so he knows firsthand what a high-level fighter looks and feels like. Hwanggi then starts feeling a wave of nerves coming over him as he starts wondering to himself what happens if Jael just keeps on winning the way he has been, and more specifically what happens if he ends up going through every single member of the gym one by one before he finally runs out of stamina and hits his limit. He also starts to get scared that his turn is coming up and he is not sure if he will be able to win or not. He thinks that he was wrong as he really can't predict how it's going to turn out. Jael then tells Hwanggi that it's time for the match, but Hwanggi turns around and says that they are going to end welcome match here, and since the sparring session ended up being longer, he will discharge all of them earlier today. The boys quickly run up to Hwanggi and asks why he is not going against Jael. They also tries to convince him, but Hwanggi says that he can't go there and injure Jael. Later that night, Hwanggi goes to the CEO and begs him to let him fight in a match with Jael. The CEO then asks him if it's because of the welcoming match and says that he have heard about that. It turns out, Hwanggi thought that he didn't go up the octagon because he didn't want to hurt him is the lamest excuse ever. Eventually, Hwanggi realized that he is afraid of Jael and it's driving him mad that he is feeling like this. Hwanggi thinks that he cannot continue living as a fighter with this kind of humiliation and he need to fight this. The CEO opens up the conversation by telling Hwanggi that things must have been really tough for him ever since everything played out on the broadcast, but that everyone already knows he is a professional fighter through and through, which means having something like that happen must have hit his ego in a pretty painful and deep way. After laying that groundwork, the CEO then goes ahead and starts working on manipulating Hwanggi by bringing up the fact that Jael is an incredibly hot topic right now and that pretty much everyone is talking about him, and that if Hwanggi manages to be the one who actually beats him, then all of that attention and glory is going to shift straight over to him. Once Hwanggi gets up and leaves the room, the CEO immediately turns to his head secretary and tells him to go ahead and start putting together the arrangements for this match to be set up as the co-main event of the next card they are running. Meanwhile, the journalists are sitting around discussing the upcoming matchup between Jael and Hwanggi and talking about the interesting angle of two fighters who train out of the exact same gym now finding themselves on opposite sides of a fight. Hyman weighs in and points out that in this particular industry, money sits above absolutely everything else and that people in this business are fully capable of doing just about anything when there is enough money involved to make it worth their while. Hyman then follows that up by saying that she is planning to go online and put together some gossip centered around Jael to stir things up a little. Over at the headquarters of a North American martial arts magazine forum, the main host DJ Ariel Watson is sitting there reading the article about Jael online and finds himself genuinely impressed by everything he is reading about this fighter. The following day, Jael goes out with Mina over Tegbaki and she asks him if he has any specific feelings towards. Jael says that he don't have any specific feelings for her, and then she says that these people online are sharing her videos without her permission. She then looks through her subscribers and finds a channel with so many videos. Mina gets shocked to see that it's Fight Dog magazine. Jael quickly takes a look and remembers Ariel Watson, thinking he has seen and mentioned his video. He then asks Mina if she can try to access the live chat now, and then she says that Ariel wants to interview. Jael realizes that it's a huge opportunity to let the international martial arts industry know about him. The next day, all the people in the gym talks about Jael's interview and how they are not happy about that. Meanwhile, Jael is getting scolded by Wongi for doing an interview without the permission of the CEO. Jael says that there is nothing about having to earn permission first in his contract. Jael then brings up the fact that the two of them are not even operating under the same contract to begin with, and hearing that only makes Wongi even more furious and wound up than he already was. Wongi fires back by saying that he may not know exactly what the CEO is going to do about it, but he is pretty confident that the deputy director is absolutely not going to just let something like this slide without doing anything about it. Wongi then goes further and says that as the official representative of this gym, he feels completely compelled to step up and hand out some kind of punishment for the way Jael has been carrying himself, and Jael responds by casually asking him whether that means he is going to have to start doing all of his training on his own from this point forward. Wongi then makes it clear that effective immediately, Jael is fully prohibited from coming in to train at the gym, and that he is no longer allowed to make use of any of the facilities the gym has to offer under any circumstances. Hearing all of that laid out in front of him, Jael does not take any of it seriously and instead starts making fun of Wongi for pulling a move like this, saying out loud that the only reason he is doing any of this right before their fight is because he is genuinely scared of what Jael is capable of doing to him. After getting that last word in, Jael turns around and walks out of there, tossing the label of scaredy cat at Wongi on his way out the door. As he walks away, Jael thinks to himself that under normal circumstances something like this would have landed him in a pretty serious amount of trouble, but the truth is that he simply does not care about that anymore. He then turns his attention to his system and finds that he has gone ahead and received a brand new system skill waiting for him. Later that day, Wongi pays a visit to Hyman to sit down and talk about all the rumors that have been making their way around the martial arts industry recently. He also brings up the point that under normal circumstances, when two fighters from the same gym end up scheduled to compete against one another, the standard thing that usually happens is that one of them goes off and trains at a completely different gym in the meantime. He then goes ahead and sits down to give Hyman a full interview covering his upcoming fight with Jael as well as a handful of other topics that have been floating around. Hyman then takes that interview and puts it up on her YouTube channel, and it ends up spreading and going viral in a pretty significant way not long after it goes up. At that very same time, Jael is sitting in his classroom with his head down and looking like he is completely knocked out asleep, while the other students around him start thinking among themselves that something might actually be wrong with him and that he could be having some kind of seizure. As it turns out, however, what is actually going on is that Jael is deep in thought about training, and in reality his mind is fully inside the virtual space of the match preparation protocol that his system provides him access to. So while everything about him on the outside looks like a guy who just fell asleep in class, he is actually putting in serious work and training hard inside that virtual space the entire time. Later that evening, Jael is out on the street when he unexpectedly runs into Sukdu, who wastes no time before extending an invitation for Jael to come along with him to a spot he regularly uses for practice over in Apgujeong so the two of them can get into a fight together. Jael thinks it over for a moment and ends up accepting the offer without too much hesitation, deciding that he might as well treat the whole thing as just another valuable piece of his ongoing training. At this unfamiliar location, RFC's light heavyweight level player Jinman walks over and greets Jael, casually mentioning that it looks like he has got some unpaid debts that still need to be settled with their members before things can move forward. Jael wastes no time and says that they should just jump straight into the match right away and get things going, but Jinman tells him to slow down and explains that they need to properly warm themselves up before anything actually gets started. He also sweetens the deal by telling Jael that if he goes through the warming up session first without making a fuss about it, he will let him use all of the gym's facilities as much as he wants and without any kind of restriction. After all of that is sorted out, Jael and Sukdu both step into the octagon and Jinman lays out the terms by explaining that what they are about to do is full contact sparring, meaning it is a match that is going to be fought without any headgear or kick guard protecting either of them, making the whole thing feel and function almost exactly like a real fight would. The match then gets underway with Jaeol immediately taking note of the fact that Sukdu carries himself in a way that looks a whole lot more like a proper and polished fighter than he did before, which makes complete sense given that a significant amount of time has passed since they were both on the Real Fighter show together. Sukdu then throws a punch at Jaeol that hits hard enough to make Jaeol think to himself that if he had tried to counter that the way he normally would, he could have very easily been knocked out cold right then and there from the force of it. Sukdu then keeps the pressure going and continues throwing punch after punch at Jaeol, who manages to read each one and dodge out of the way every single time without taking a clean hit. Jaeol then makes his move and completely wraps himself around Sukdu's body in a tight clinch, and as he does that he thinks to himself that if this were the version of him that showed up during Real Fighter, there is absolutely no question that he would be losing this fight right now. Jaeol then knee strikes Sukdu in the stomach and with that he throws a punch at him. Jaeol continues to throw punches at Sokildu while Jinman thinks that Jaeol is actually talented. During the fight, Sukdu gets furious and charges at Jaeol, who grabs him by his neck and slams his face on the ground. After that, Sukdu does a choke that surprises Jinman as he thinks that Jaeol got him perfectly. He also thinks that Sukdu don't stand a chance against him, so it would be better if he tap out now. Out of nowhere, Jaeol decides to turn things around on Sukdu and tells him that Sukdu himself was the one who said that if two people have a grudge between them, the place to settle it is inside the octagon, and that right now he is giving him the exact chance to do just that. He also throws in a comment telling Sukdu to work hard, which hits a nerve and sends Sukdu into a fury as he comes charging straight at Jaeol, throwing punches one after another. Jaeol however handles every single one of them with ease and dodges them all without much trouble at all, while Jinman stands on the outside yelling at Sukdu and telling him that just throwing punches without any kind of thought or strategy behind them is never going to be enough to get the job done against someone like Jaeol. Right at that moment, Jaeol simply turns around and starts walking away because the back and forth with Sukdu has genuinely worn him out and left him feeling exhausted. What nobody sees coming however is that the moment Jaeol turns his back, Sukdu takes the opening and punches him hard and clean directly in the face, which immediately gets Jaeol's blood boiling and makes him furious in a way that is hard to miss. Jinman sees what just happened and rushes into the octagon right away, going straight to Jaeol and offering an apology on Sukdu's behalf for what he just pulled. Jaeol however is not interested in accepting that and tells Jinman that he now has to see this unfinished grudge through to the end right here in this ring, especially since Jinman himself was the one who laid out that rule in the first place. Jinman then shifts his attention over to Sukdu and gets genuinely angry with him, telling him that since he was the one who started all of this in the first place, it is on him to be the one who puts an end to it as well, and with that he turns around and walks straight out of the octagon, leaving the two of them to deal with it themselves. The match starts off with Sukdu punching Jaeol, but he manages to dodge them all and hit Sukdu so hard that Jinman had to step in the ring to stop Jaeol. Later, the news about the fight got to Wongi, who thinks that Jaeol is improving again and he's a whole different person compared to how he was during the welcoming match. Wongi then tells another person that they should cut only the second round part, and then upload it anonymously. The moment the video appears online, active discussions break out everywhere. The audience quickly recognizes the fighters and start pointing out that this was no sparring session at all, as it was a real fight. Wongi reads through the comments with barely concealed satisfaction. Jaeol may be talented, he thinks, but he is still just a schoolboy. Viewers begin speculating that Jaeol was trying to seriously hurt his opponent. He hits too hard and does not stop. Then a full, uncut version of the fight appears in the comments. Everything the deputy director carefully set up unravels in an instant. With the complete footage out there, the whole picture becomes clear. The coach's scheme falls apart completely. Jaeol watches the full video and his first instinct is simple and blunt. He is going to punch everyone responsible in the face and be done with it. Then his phone buzzes. It is a message from Jensen, asking to meet. When they sit down together, Jinman speaks on behalf of the team. He apologizes for the way everything played out and tells Jaeol that he showed himself well throughout all of it. Before Jaeol can fully process the moment, he hears children's voices behind him. He turns slowly. Two boys are standing there, eyes wide. They had watched the fight and today's one too, and they think Jaeol is incredible. Jaeol tells them gently that they are too young for all of this and that they should be reading comics instead. The boys ask for his autograph, calling him a future MMA fighter. Jaeol slows down and steps in. He takes the floor and tells the boys, calmly and seriously, not to end up like that man. He means every word. The boys look up at him with shining eyes and promise they never will. They leave buzzing with excitement. When Jaeol gets home, he finds a new video already circulating online. The boys were not just watching the fight. They were filming it too. The autograph, it turns out, was a very good investment. Jaeol smiles to himself. He is going to become a real MMA fighter, not stay a beginner. The press conference that follows draws a more diverse crowd than usual. Hyman is visibly irritated, convinced this is all Gabriel's doing and the fallout from that interview with Wongi. The English journalist in the room decides to raise the issue directly, pointing out that only a cropped version of the video was released to the public initially. The blonde beside him starts to object, but Giles speaks for himself. He says simply that there was nothing wrong with it. The journalist brings up the autographed notebook, noting that Giles clearly has a lot of time for his fans. Giles says it was his first experience of something like that and that he was not expecting it to be an English notebook. The audience picks up on the moment. Wongi, sitting nearby, is seething every bit of attention and praise finds its way to the schoolboy. The video setup he orchestrated turned out to be completely useless. By the end of the interview, questions are open to the audience. Giles' name is repeated so often that Wongi loses control entirely. He slams his fist on the table. The sound is loud enough to make the whole audience flinch and turn to stare. Wongi is convinced he will win no matter what. Giles, completely unbothered, asks him plainly whether he has figured out yet why nobody is asking about the match. He says it is because everyone already knows who is going to win. He reminds Wongi that they have already met once, and that he put the coach flat on the mat. Giles asks, almost casually, whether Wongi has already forgotten about that guillotine. Wongi explodes out of his seat. He shouts that the match was not fair and that the circumstances were unequal. He promises that he will be better this time, every single time. Giles lets him finish, and then simply says that in their last match he was an unknown. Nobody knew what was coming and that was still not enough to stop him from breaking Mo's rhythm completely. He asks Wongi directly whether he still does not understand why all the attention has landed on a schoolboy. Wongi had worked so hard to build up to this moment, had tried so hard to control the hype around that cropped video, and yet all of it drifted naturally toward Giles anyway. Giles acknowledges that the champion despises him, but he says that he is grateful to the coach for everything, because without him he would never have gotten to this point at all. Soon, Giles says that he will have his first match on the professional stage, and Wongi is going to hand the victory to a schoolboy himself. The host jumps to his feet and urges the mentor to compose himself. Adderley sits back down through gritted teeth. The night of the fight arrives and every ticket sold out on pre-order and pay-per-view numbers are massive. The crowd has been waiting for this for a long time. To warm applause, Giles walks out to the stage and his mentor grabs him by the shoulder and asks if he is listening. He tells him to get his head out of the clouds. Giles looks at him calmly and asks why he is the nervous one. He tells him to breathe in and out slowly. Giles himself is not nervous at all as he has done everything the preparation protocol demanded. By his own reckoning, he is going into this with a 90% chance of winning. All that is left is to go out there and take it. Giles starts calculating the distance, wondering whether to stay back and work from range or push in closer. Before he can decide, Wongi catches him with two quick shots to the face. The first one lands clean on his head. Wongi is showing a completely different version of himself today compared to their last encounter, and Giles feels it immediately. He quickly closes the distance to reset, and on the outside, he looks composed, but Wongi is already running through his own game plan. He is going to use his reach advantage to the fullest. He figures the schoolboy cannot handle it. Giles decides to block everything coming his way and keep his distance tight. He knows how Wongi operates. If the punches are not landing, he will start moving around the ring. If that stops working, he will switch to kicks. Giles is tracking all of it, but a momentary lapse in focus costs him another punch. Wongi's feints are working exactly as intended. Wongi's corner is telling him to bait Giles into throwing a kick so he can grab the leg, take control of the fight, and get a mount going. Giles throws the kick, but the plan turns out to be far harder to execute than it looked. Giles lands a thunderous kick to the ribs and Wongi takes the full force of it. It is a body kick nobody in the arena has seen from him before, and it is on a completely different level from anything he has shown publicly. A shot that clean and that heavy simply cannot be caught, no matter how badly you want to, and Wongi finds it easier to just break the distance and reset. The crowd starts telling the champion to protect his legs and just survive the round. Wongi grits through it, telling himself he only needs to hold on a little longer. Then Giles throws another kick, and this one genuinely shakes Wongi's balance for the first time. Wongi has been keeping his distance, but Giles is clearly done letting him breathe. Another kick comes in. Wongi is struggling to read them because both shots look identical at the start, making it nearly impossible to tell which one is coming. All those hours Giles spent drilling and training are paying off right now. Wongi is on the scoreboard and horrified to see how much time is left. He needs to survive another 2.5 minutes. Jinsu then tells Giles that if he is going to push Wongi into the corner, then he needs to finish it, not let him off the hook. Wongi keeps missing punch after punch, and another guy watches from his seat and feels completely vindicated. His instincts about this kid were right. Jaeol is not just talented, he is controlling the entire match. He keeps switching stances and attacking from exactly the angle Wang Yi is trying to move toward, which steadily corners the champion with nowhere to go. Wang Yi is not just in a tough spot, he looks completely helpless. Eating one attack after another like that, he looks less like a champion and more like a mouse that has stepped into a trap. Jaeol lands a precise tip kick and the whole arena can see that he is running this fight. Everyone expected Wang Yi to be the one in control. Instead he is just absorbing punishment and waiting for the round to end. Wang Yi tries to attack to change the momentum and walks straight into a storm of counters. Jaeol takes over the boxing completely. One of the commentators says it out loud, that you simply do not want to box with Jared. The moment he starts controlling the distance the counter comes, and it is not just boxing anymore, it is something closer to art. Jaeol lands a grazing punch, one of the most technically difficult strikes to pull off cleanly, and the crowd reacts with genuine disbelief that a debutante just threw that. Wang Yi tells himself he cannot lose. He needs to switch positions with Jaeol somehow and get back on top. His corner tells him to break Jaeol down and get him into a hold, because that is the only path to winning at this point. But this damn kid will not stop moving. Wang Yi manages to land a move but still cannot turn the tide. The two fighters end up tangled and Jaeol decides to solve that problem his own way, and he throws Wang Yi clean over his back. Wang Yi gets planted into the canvas and it looks like something that should not be physically possible given the size difference. The champion secures an underhook trying to recover but Jaeol just throws him again. Jaeol locks in an armbar during the brief pause and works on tightening the grip. It is not fully secured yet but the direction it is heading is obvious. Wang Yi's corner thinks Jaeol has made an error and that their man has finally caught him. But Jaeol is not done. He lifts his opponent off the ground and drives him back into the floor with everything he has. Wang Yi, one of the best fighters the RFC has ever produced in his prime, is lying imprinted in the canvas. The person who put him there is an 18-year-old high school student making his professional debut. Wang Yi cannot wrap his head around it. He tells himself a champion has to hold on and refuses to loosen his grip. Wang Yi cannot believe what he is seeing and thinks that Jaeol does not hesitate for a single second. Two slams back to back, full force, completely unashamed of his own physical dominance. With the grip finally broken, Jaeol comes down from the mounted position and starts throwing heavy shots straight down. The sound of the first punch echoes across the whole arena. Jaeol does not stop. He keeps landing, one after another, until the referee steps in and pulls him off. The fight is over. Jaeol wins by knockout in the first round at 4 minutes and 14 seconds. Wang Yi cannot even walk out of the octagon on his own. Nobody in the building expected to see a debut like this from an 18-year-old kid. Jaeol walks down from the ring with his head up and the crowd is stunned into near silence before the noise comes rushing back. Jaeol's father stands among his friends, speechless. His son just knocked out a real fighter. Journalists are on Jaeol immediately as the newcomer won in stunning fashion and they want everything. Jaeol admits it is hard to put into words how he feels. He had expected this outcome in principle, but now that the moment is here, he wants to use it properly. He thanks the people who helped him get ready. First and foremost, Jinsu, who taught him his kicks, and Jaeol says plainly that teaching someone to kick properly is genuinely not easy. He also says he has always wanted to be someone the overlooked and underestimated could look to. He hopes tonight is the start of that. And then he talks about his father. The man who always believed him when he said he wanted to do this, who never once told him it was a bad idea. Jaeol's father has tears running down his face by the time the words are out. Jaeol then turns the press conference in a different direction. He asks Daejeon directly whether he wants to have a real fight this time, for the title. Daejeon hears him out and gives him credit for the match. He says he expected nothing less but then he asks the room why this kid suddenly thinks they are on the same level. He already has his 7th title defense lined up and his opponent is Erwin, who sits second in the rankings and has won 5 straight to get there. Jaeol just made his debut tonight and is already calling for the king. Daejeon tells him to sit down, do things the right way, and earn it properly. Jaeol just laughs as he points out that people are interested, sponsors are ready to pay, and that the RFC runs on exactly that kind of energy. He says the audience would show up for it, that it has been a long time since a fight genuinely had that kind of pull. He reminds Daejeon that he also has 5 wins, and then casually suggests Daejeon seems pretty satisfied with a victory that was basically handed to him in an exhibition. The CEO steps in before it goes any further, wraps the interview, and directs the crowd's attention toward the main event still ahead. The press conference ends with warm applause. In his office, the CEO is furious. He tells his secretary that Jaeol's words are like poison and that if the RFC keeps letting this kid run his mouth unchecked it is going to end badly for everyone. The secretary agrees that giving Jaeol another fight against one of their top names is a risk they cannot afford. If Daejeon loses to a rookie, the entire RFC goes down with him. But then she also points out that of all the light heavyweights on the roster, Jaeol is the most promising asset they have. The smarter play, she argues, is to let him build his record and become a genuine star rather than trying to bury him with a loss right now. He will have to lose eventually anyway. The CEO listens and then lays out the situation. Jaeol's contract has two particular conditions in it. First, he only fights 7 times in the RFC before he walks. Second, he wants 70% of pay-per-view revenue. The CEO thinks the kid is completely out of his mind, but there is a clause buried in the deal. If Jaeol loses even once across those 7 fights, the CEO gets full control over the contract terms and can restructure everything however he wants. The way CEO sees it, he just needs to engineer 1 loss and perhaps 4 wins and 3 defeats. He has already thought it through. Wongi is done, not worth using again. But somewhere in the roster there is a fighter strong enough that losing to them would not look suspicious, someone who on paper should beat a newcomer but could plausibly lose to Jaeol if things broke right. The CEO pulls out a fighter's card and slides it across the desk to his secretary. The next morning Jaeol shows up to the gym like nothing happened. He figures he will be training alone and is already mentally prepared for it. Then he hears footsteps behind him. He turns and asks if they want another fight. But the fighters coming toward him are not there for that. They want him to look at their techniques and give them his honest read. They watched the debut match and the counter that Jaeol landed had genuinely shaken them. They want to know how to do what he did. Some of them also make it clear that not everyone in the gym is aligned with the deputy director. There are plenty of guys who want to get better and they are asking Jaeol to train them. They are willing to be his sparring partners, his punching bags, whatever he needs. Jaeol looks at them all standing there empty-handed and asks why they are still standing around without their gloves on, or did they want him to work on them with his bare hands? The fighters scatter toward the equipment room immediately. Jaeol sits for a moment and takes stock of where he is. He has accumulated 1120 points. He thinks about pushing his level from D+ up to C, which will cost another 500. He has 2 skills sitting at D+ right now that could both climb to C with the investment. He thinks about fighters like Anthony Johnson, who made a career out of relentless forward pressure, and what that kind of style would take to build a combination of kicks and wrestling working together. Jiu-jitsu opens up a different path, giving him the ability to take the fight to the ground on his own terms and handle other grapplers in a real match. He runs through the history of it in his head. In the early days of MMA, Jiu-jitsu had no real competition in the octagon as fighters who had come up through the NCAA brought a different kind of pressure to the sport and the pure Jiu-jitsu specialists gradually faded into the background. However, wrestlers were not just strong, they were adaptable. Ground pressure, transitions, and the ability to dictate where the fight happened. Cain Velasquez and many others built their names on exactly that foundation. In modern MMA, wrestling is not optional. It is the baseline. Without it there is no business being in the octagon at all. Jaeol makes the decision and spends the 500 points. From the outside it looks like he has fallen asleep sitting up. He keeps the remaining 620 in reserve for emergencies. He then comes back to himself and gets ready to train, but his phone rings and it is the RFC with data on his next match. They have apparently decided a title shot is too early and assigned him an opponent instead. Jaeol asks who it is and the person on the other end tells him not to be too surprised. Finally, the time arrives for the main event of RFC to get underway, and the crowd is buzzing with excitement at the prospect of watching Daejeon go up against Junseok in what everyone expects to be a serious and high-stakes matchup. One of the coaches then pulls Jaeol aside and mentions that he has been hearing some pretty strange rumors floating around that are connected to the Apgujeong RFC gym. He explains that from what he has been hearing, Daejeon has not been showing up to the gym at all for somewhere around 2 months now, and he asks Jaeol directly whether he happened to see Daejeon at any point when he made his trip out to Apgujeong to fight a few days ago. Jaeol tells him that the last he heard, Daejeon had mentioned he was going to be training specifically for the upcoming match, and that he personally did not even catch a single glimpse of him while he was out there. He also adds that as far as he can see, there is really no logical reason for Daejeon to be avoiding the Apgujeong gym in the first place, especially since Junseok is not even a member of that gym to begin with. He goes on to say that even if Junseok had been a member of that gym, the right and proper thing to do in that kind of situation would have been for Junseok to be the one who moves and trains elsewhere, not Daejeon. Hearing all of that, the coach then asks Jaeol if he still remembers the moment during Real Fighter when he landed that kick on Daejeon, because the word going around is that the impact from that kick may have actually ended up fracturing his ribs. He then goes further and explains that this injury is most likely the real reason behind why Daejeon has been staying away and has not appeared in any matches recently, and he also points out that Daejeon has always had a well-known reputation for holding back and going light whenever he is in sparring sessions. They both realize that the reason Daejeon is fighting Junsik right now is because he thinks that Junsik is a fighter nothing to him. Eventually, Daejeon manages to win the match, and the coach, seeing that, thinks that his upper body part strength is just as amazing as usual. Daejeon then grabs the mic and thanks everyone who has congratulated him and says that he worked hard on training himself for this fight. He further says that it's important to know that the title match can only be held for those with enough qualifications and capability, so not everyone can stand on that match. Sometimes, in this MMA world, there are fighters that they call with the nickname landmine. They do not have special characteristics, and their rankings are not specifically high, but they are still significantly strong, and the style of their match is sticky wrestling base. That night, one of a massive-looking guy is sitting with the CEO, who is just stunned to see how he is nothing like humans. The guy turns out to be Ibrahim Makhmadov, and he promises the CEO that he is going to beat his next opponent to death. The following day, Jael's mentor asks if he is bothered by the result of the late Jael's final match. Jael hesitates and says that he do think about it, but the mentor asks him why is he so hesitant. The mentor then applies bandage on his feet and says that his name might be the same as him, but honestly, he is far better. The mentor also expresses that he regrets not taking care of the late Jael properly. Jael tells him that he can take more proper care now, and he will give him a chance to guide him on how to do it like him. Later at conference, everyone wonders why Ibrahim's belly is so big, and Jael thinks that he must have consumed some candies to look like that. During the interview, Hyaman asks Ibrahim about his brother Aslam, who paralyzed his opponent in a bare-knuckle fight. Ibrahim says that his opponent was unlucky to be involved in that accident, and he says that people with the name of Jael are fated to die inside the octagon. Getting furious, Jael grabs the mic and starts mocking Ibrahim. He says that he will also break his skull open. That makes Ibrahim furious, and he charges at Jael with a punch. Jael, however, does not just stand there and take it, and fires back with a punch of his own that ends up connecting cleanly and landing right on Ibrahim's face with serious force. Ibrahim then drops down to his knees and finds himself completely stunned and struggling to wrap his head around the fact that he has just been beaten up by someone like Jael of all people. Pulling back to a few years earlier in the Republic of Chechnya, Aslam and Ibrahim are walking together through the bitter cold, making their way through the harsh conditions side by side. Aslam brings up the question of whether Ibrahim remembers the Asian fighter who ended up passing out because of something Aslam did to him. Ibrahim says that he knows exactly who he is talking about, describing him as a guy who used to have some pretty decent footwork back in his day, but Aslam then reveals to him that things turned out far worse than just passing out, as that fighter actually ended up becoming permanently disabled as a result of what happened between them. Aslam then brushes the whole thing off by saying that the outcome was simply the result of that fighter being born with weak genetics that came from his ethnic background, as if that alone explains and justifies everything. Back in the present, the audience is absolutely going wild and losing their minds over the sight of Jael landing a punch on that enormous and intimidating monster of a person, and nobody in the crowd can quite believe that he is still standing there tall and composed after everything that just went down. Later on, Jael's mentor comes to him with some really significant news, telling him that every single on-the-spot ticket available for the event has been completely sold out, and that even the additional seats that were thrown in and made available at the very last minute have been snapped up and sold out as well. The mentor also says that Ibrahim will be consuming lots of drugs, and despite having a urine test a day before, he is sure that he will do even the cheapest thing to pass the test. The mentor then tells Jael to be careful because Caucasians are known for their grinding technique. Jael says that he is going to practice more to tackle that and thinks that he has also used his 500 points to upgrade the jiu-jitsu level, and now what's left is to do his very best. Finally, the day of the co-main event arrives, and everyone is excited for Jael and Ibrahim's match. Jael realizes that Aslam is not here to watch, which is good for him because he would have been so pissed and wouldn't be able to focus. In the sports industry, there is a devil-like drug called anabolic steroid, which is immensely effective to the point where the use of this drug is referred to as the fabrication of victory. As it turns out, the person Jael is currently standing across from in that octagon has been using some kind of performance-enhancing drug, and yet Jael is still out there putting up a solid and impressive defense against everything being thrown at him despite knowing that. Jael continues to put on a genuinely incredible performance, landing strikes on his opponent while simultaneously managing to block the incoming attacks that keep coming his way without breaking down. Ibrahim starts getting more confused as he begins realizing that not only is Jael completely shrugging off the punches he is landing, but he is also firing back with punches that are noticeably stronger and harder hitting than what Ibrahim is putting out himself. After going back and forth for a while, Ibrahim then connects with a middle kick that genuinely catches Jael off guard and surprises him in a way that not much else has managed to do up to this point. Jael then thinks the situation through and comes to the conclusion that Ibrahim has clearly been pumping himself full of all kinds of drugs specifically to keep himself going. However, this means that trying to wear him down gradually is not going to work, and that his only real path to finishing this is landing one perfectly placed punch. However, when that punch lands, it has absolutely no effect on Ibrahim at all, and Ibrahim immediately tries to turn things around and come back at Jael with an attack of his own. Jael eventually manages to find the right moment and lands a perfectly clean hit directly on Ibrahim's face that causes him to lose his balance and stumble for a moment. Ibrahim then recovers just enough to take Jael down to the ground and tries to start raining hits down on him from above, but Jael manages to use his strength to shove him off to the other side before he can get properly settled. Ibrahim then starts going after Jael with a series of elbow strikes from close range, and it becomes very clear very quickly that if Jael does not find a way to get himself out of that position soon, things could turn genuinely life-threatening for him. It turns out, Jael is receiving a lot of damage, but then Jael turns his head before he got hit by the elbow. Ibrahim then pushes him against the cage as he doesn't want him to go that easily. Jael realizes that Ibrahim is now going back for his back, so he quickly stands and defends himself. Ibrahim then tries to go for a tackle, but this time Jael smashes his head on the ground. Jael then gets away from the spot without any huge damage that surprises everyone. Everyone is wondering now who will attack first. Ibrahim thinks that he shouldn't be attacked again as it's just way too dangerous and it would be hard to attack him right now as well, but he knows one thing, that if he wasn't backed up by steroids he would have passed out. Jael then moves his arm for a fake hit but quickly hits him using a kick. After that, Jael punches him straight in the chasing using a blind move on his face. Jael then uses a crescent moon kick on Ibrahim. Seeing that, the journalist wonders what that is, so Hyaman says that it's a kick taught in Taekwondo. She explains that in Taekwondo, it's also called the half moon kick. She mentions that they use their forefoot to target the liver of their opponent, and since Ibrahim's stomach is bulging out due to steroids, he became exactly the right target for the crescent moon kick. After that, Jael doesn't give Ibrahim a chance and keep attacking him continuously. Eventually, Ibrahim gets punched in the face and falls on the ground. With that, the first round ends and everyone thinks that Jael has shown an impressive performance nearing the end of the round and he is proving his skill properly. Jael's mentor then tells him that he basically destroyed Ibrahim. During the second round, Ibrahim plans on focusing on defending his head for now and avoid KO. Ibrahim picks up on something and notices that based on the way Jael is positioning and setting his foot, it looks like he is setting up to go for a middle kick. Right at that moment, however, Jael launches a kick that lands straight into Ibrahim's chest, and it turns out that what he just threw was not a middle kick at all, completely catching Ibrahim off guard with the misdirection. After landing that, Jael immediately follows up by throwing a series of punches at Ibrahim, and as the round continues it becomes increasingly obvious that Ibrahim is starting to struggle and finding it harder and harder to keep up with what Jael is putting out there. Deep down inside, Ibrahim finds himself genuinely puzzled and starts wondering to himself why it feels like Jael is not even coming close to using his full power against him, as if he is deliberately holding something back and keeping it in reserve for the right moment. Out of nowhere, Ibrahim suddenly turns to the referee and makes an appeal, claiming loudly that he has just been on the receiving end of an illegal eye poke from Jael. After the officials go back and carefully check through the slow-motion replay of the video footage from that moment, it becomes clear to everyone that there was absolutely no eye poke of any kind and that Ibrahim's appeal holds no truth to it whatsoever. The fight then resumes with Ibrahim coming out and charging straight at Jael right from the restart, but as things get going Ibrahim starts noticing with growing frustration that no matter what approach he tries or what move he attempts, he simply cannot manage to drag Jael down to the ground and keep him there the way he wants to. Jael then finds the right moment, shoves Ibrahim away to create some space, and immediately follows it up by driving a punch clean into his face, telling him that he is fully capable of doing a whole lot better than what Ibrahim has been bringing to the table so far. To push through the fear, Jael rushes in and attacks and Ibrahim try another takedown, but Jael reads it and gets out cleanly, then pulls off a flower sweep that flips the entire situation in his favor in an instant. He ends up on top with his legs pressing down into his opponent's stomach. Ibrahim starts gasping, the pain and the pressure on his breathing hitting him at the same time. He begins screaming and trying to claw his way out. Jael covers his mouth with his hand and calmly asks where all that confidence from earlier went. He tells him not to even bother pretending he wants to surrender. Ibrahim understands with complete clarity that this kid is not playing around and that things could go very badly if he stays here. He is not giving up though, and he decides he has to do whatever it takes. Jael then does something nobody in the building expects. He locks in a crucifix. The crowd cannot believe what they are watching from a newcomer. Ibrahim's will to keep going is visibly crumbling. He is convinced that if he does not get free right now, he is not walking out of this. Fighting purely on survival instinct, he manages to lift Jael and throw him off with everything he has left. After that, Jael gets back up and he knows Ibrahim has been pumped full of steroids, but he can also see that the man is already past his limit. Jael closes in and breaks 3 of Ibrahim's ribs, finishing the sequence with a shot to the chin that sends the man falling back. The referee stares at the young fighter with something close to disbelief. The second round ends at 2 minutes and 28 seconds. After the event, the RFC releases a statement with regret. Ibrahim was found to be using prohibited substances at the time of the 91st RFC. The discovery was made through a urine test conducted when he was admitted to the hospital. It appears Ibrahim had managed to get past the pre-fight inspection somehow. Once the positive test came through, they retested with a more thorough panel and found 5 additional prohibited substances. At the commentary desk, a guy says it is an interesting way for a match to end and wonders whether it was really worth going this far. His colleague points out that the guy is the one who decides whether to approve things like this, and Hyman confirms it. The final word always belongs to the president, but that also means his reputation is what gets put on the line. The guy still cannot understand why Ibrahim was cleared to compete in the first place. Hyman has a theory and she thinks the president wanted the new star to lose, for reasons of his own. Over lunch, Jael's father tells him he watched the match and that what he saw genuinely impressed him. But then he gets to the real reason he brought it up. He says Jael fought like a different person in there and that he is sure other people who know him noticed the same thing. He is not saying it was bad. He just cannot turn a blind eye to it if there is something going on with his son. Jael asks his father whether he knows about Arnold. He tells him that he did not mention it before, but the two of them had a connection. His father had trained the boy from time to time. And the man who put Arnold in that condition was Ibrahim's older brother. Jael admits that he has been carrying complicated feelings about it for a while and that it was probably what pushed him toward wanting revenge. Jael's father listens and folds his hands on the table and says what he needs to say. Whatever Jael chooses to do, wherever this goes, his father will always be in his corner. But he wants his son to hold on to one thing. Jael should be fighting because he loves boxing and mixed martial arts, not because he is chasing someone's debt. His father understands that the heart does not take orders and that Jael is still in high school, so his feelings tend to move faster than his thinking. Then he laughs at himself a little and apologizes for rambling, saying he is getting old and starting to lecture without noticing. Hyman sits down with Daejeon after the 91st RFC and Jael has been trying to bait a response out of him and Daejeon has seen it. Wongi, watching from somewhere nearby, still insists a schoolboy has no business fighting for the title. Daejeon himself says he would be very happy to arrange another meeting between Jael and the cage wall. Hyman asks whether that should be taken as Daejeon officially agreeing to a title match and whether the audience should start getting ready. Daejeon slows her down. He says he needs to finish his treatment first and that the decision ultimately sits with the company. That evening, Jael is alone working through his training, hands going, fully in it. Then his father comes through the door looking worried and says that something has come up. After that, Jael arrives at that empty location and quickly barges inside. He then starts shouting for Jinsu to come out, and out of nowhere a guy jumps at him. Jael manages to dodge his kick and hits him on the ribs using a side kick. The guy then turns out to be Jinsu himself, and Jael asks him why he is here. However, Jinsu is trembling with pain because of that insane kick that Jael attacked him with. Later, Jael looks around the new gym and asks Jinsu, who says that it's the PPV sales revenue from his previous match. Jinsu says that he divided some cash for him and his dad but they chose not to use it and instead build this gym. Jinsu then explains that it wouldn't be easy for him to practice at RFC Jongyo training ground leisurely and they couldn't risk him moving to another team. Jael feels bad because he gave them the money to use freely on themselves instead of wasting it like this, but Jinsu says that they wanted to use it for him. Jael's father then thinks that it's been so long since he saw his son smile that genuinely. Jael then notices a wreath placed there and asks Jinsu about it, who says that Jinman sent this. Jinsu himself wondered why he would send something like that as it looks like they are opening this for business. Just then, Jinman shows up at the gym and tells Jael that he has seen his matches and he is impressive. Jinman tells him to call him by his name as it's not like he will maintain this politeness when he sees him inside the octagon. He also reveals that he came here to be his sparring partner because Jinsu is too old to do some sparring. Later that night, the CEO meets with Daejeon and tells him to shut Jael's mouth once and for all. Back at the gym, Jaeol and Jinman finally wrap up their sparring session and both of them are completely drained and worn out from everything they just put each other through. Jinman sits with his thoughts and comes to the conclusion that Jaeol is genuinely quite good at fighting, but that there is something undeniably strange about him as well, because he seems to have nearly everything a fighter could want and all of it is sitting at an incredibly high level of quality that does not quite make sense for someone at his stage. Jaeol then turns to Jinman and asks him straight up which one of them he thinks is the better fighter between him and Daejeon. Jinman thinks it over and explains that Daejeon has some seriously impressive wrestling skills that allow him to more than make up for any disadvantage that comes with fighting across weight classes, and that when he really thinks about it, he actually believes that Daejeon is a much more natural and fitting competitor for the light heavyweight division than anything else. Jaeol then pushes the conversation further and asks him what he thinks would happen if he went ahead and fought Daejeon directly, and Jinman does not sugarcoat his answer at all, telling him plainly that if he tried that fight 10 times in a row, he would come away with a loss 9 of those times, and that right there gives a pretty clear picture of just how frighteningly strong Daejeon really is. That answer does not sit well with Jaeol at all and it fires him up enough that he immediately decides he wants to jump back in and do more sparring to work through that frustration, but Jinsu steps in at that point and suggests that instead of going back to what they were doing, they should do one clean round under straight boxing rules and see how that plays out. Jaeol goes ahead and asks Jinman whether he does not need to wear any headgear for the session, to which Jinman responds that headgear is completely unnecessary for what they are about to do. After that, their sparring session kicks off with Jaeol charging straight towards Jinman, who is already well aware of the fact that Jaeol's punching skills are genuinely impressive and not something to be taken lightly. For the time being, Jinman makes the decision to open up with a defensive approach and carefully observe how the situation develops before making any aggressive moves of his own. Jaeol then uses his own body as a feint and unleashes a series of punches directly at Jinman, which ends up leaving Jinman completely confused and unable to read what is coming next. Witnessing that exchange, Jinsu finds himself genuinely surprised by what he is seeing, because he notices that Jinman's guard is starting to loosen up, and while he has always known that Jaeol is skilled at boxing, it becomes very clear to him in that moment that Jaeol has improved by an enormous amount since the last time he had seen him fight. Jinman puts in his absolute best effort to throw his own punches back at Jaeol, but none of it seems to work at all, as Jaeol simply opens up with a light front hand jab before smoothly following it up with a powerful backhand punch that catches Jinman completely off guard. Jaeol has already predicted ahead of time that Jinman is going to attempt to use his back punch, so he instinctively moves forward to cut off the angle before it can land. However, at that very moment, Jinman connects with a devastating side punch that sends Jaeol flying completely off his feet. Jaeol internally reflects on just how terrifyingly dangerous that hit had been, thinking to himself that if Jinman had put even the slightest bit more power behind that punch, it genuinely could have been fatal. Jinman then furiously turns to Jaeol and demands to know whether he is planning on taking the session and angrily reminds him that he had never once told him to hold back or go easy on him during their sparring. After that, Jaeol charges at Jinman and punches him so hard that deals too much damage. Jinman tries to turn around to do something, but Jaeol hits him with another punch on his face. After that, Jinman knocks out and when he gets consciousness, he finds Jinsu staring at him. Jinsu tells him that Jaeol broke his defense and did a body shot. Outside, Jinman tells Jaeol that his boxing skills are really impressive, and then they all go for a drink. The following day, Daejeon walks over to where Jinman is standing in the gym and questions him about why he is looking so unusually weak and worn out. Jinman gets confused by the comment and fires back by questioning why Daejeon is even bothering to check up on someone else's physical condition in the first place. Daejeon then points out that it seems like Jinman had been drinking heavily the previous night, which is apparently causing him to lose track of who ranks higher and who ranks lower in their group. He then goes ahead and asks Jinman where exactly he had been the night before, but Jinman pushes back and questions why Daejeon is getting so worked up and furious over him simply having a drink. Daejeon then reaches out and grabs Jinman firmly by his collar, demanding to know why Jinman had been sparring with Jaeol the previous day. However, Jinman completely loses his cool at that point and aggressively argues right back at Daejeon, even going as far as throwing out a serious and cutting insult directed straight at him. After that heated exchange, Daejeon storms over to the octagon and tells Jinman to get himself in there and fight him directly if he truly believes he is all that capable. The very next day, Jinsu and Jaeol make their way over to Jinman's house to check in on him, but the moment he opens the door, both of them are completely shocked to find him covered in injuries from head to toe. Jinman then reveals that he had gone ahead and done a sparring session with Daejeon, which leaves both Jinsu and Jaeol absolutely stunned and speechless. Jean-man then turns to Jaeol and sincerely apologizes to him, explaining that he had really wanted to land a punch on Daejeon during their session, but had been completely unable to do so because Daejeon had turned out to be overwhelmingly and impossibly strong. The next day, Jinsu asks Jaeol if it's okay to have a title match right away, without an initial sparring. Jinsu also says that they don't have much time left either and he will open his eyes and suddenly he will be weighing himself. Jinsu then gets all nervous and says that it will be hard without sparring. He also says that even in the local gyms and other gyms, there's not a gym in this tiny country that young Gil hasn't searched. He also says that he went as far as doing an international call to Thailand, so Jaeol asks him about it. Jinsu says that he was thinking of getting some Thai fighters to do sparring with him. Jinsu then yells at Jaeol that he should start worrying a little and stop giving him that smiley face like he have no worry in this world. Just then, two fighters arrive at the gym, and Jinsu introduces them as Kyle, the older one, and the other one is the younger one, Ben. Jinsu says that they are the sparring partners that Dave introduced to him. It turns out, Dave White told the boys to go Korea and spend 3 months there to train with Jaeol. Hearing that, both of the boys get surprised, but Dave says that if he sees their potential while they train there, he will give them undercard matches. Jaeol then tells Kyle and Ben to rest first and they can start sparring tomorrow. However, one of them says that they can just do it today. It turns out, he is Kyle, who is a fighter from 2020 National Collegiate Athletic Association All-American. He has done boxing starting from middle school, so it's just natural for him to be an MMA fighter. He was inducted into CSOF, the third largest organization in the country, and he then brought 4 consecutive wins only in a year. At the end, he signed in with WFC, but the treatment in the WFC community wasn't that good, and after 8 months of not even being able to get into UFC undercard match. However, the two brothers find it hard to understand and accept the fact that they have to train in this small gym located in Asia. During the sparring session, Kyle manages to slam Jaeol forcefully down onto the ground, which causes Jaeol to truly come to terms with and recognize the incredible potential that a world-class fighter actually possesses. After that, it becomes Ben's turn to step in, and it is revealed that he had originally trained as a gymnast when he was a young child, but had eventually made the switch over to MMA sometime during his mid-teens, largely due to the way his body had developed and grown in size over the years. Ben had gone on to achieve 2 consecutive first-round knockouts in his fighting career, and that remarkable string of victories had ultimately earned him a scouting call from the WFC organization. Later that same evening, Kyle brings up the question of why exactly Dave had decided to send the two of them to that particular location, to which Ben responds that he is not entirely sure of the reason, but speculates that it might be because Dave wants them to gain and earn something valuable before he goes ahead and hands them an undercard match opportunity. However, Kyle becomes absolutely furious when he is faced with the reality that they are expected to spend a full 3 months in a place like that one, and no matter how hard Ben attempts to calm him down and reason with him, Kyle simply refuses to understand the situation and ends up walking away in anger. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Jaeol is training completely alone by himself at the gym, reflecting deeply on the fact that the skill levels of WFC fighters are on a completely different plane compared to what he had previously experienced. He also finds himself thinking about how both Kyle and Ben have never actually competed inside the WFC before, yet they are already beginning their journey and taking their very first steps into that world. It is right at that moment that Jaeol suddenly receives a notification from the system informing him that all of his skills have been successfully increased and upgraded to level C. After that, the system sent him a notification letting him know that the second challenge mission had become available, which meant that he was now able to return to the virtual world. Jaeol then spent time training inside the virtual world and quickly came to the realization that the system had grown significantly more powerful since the last time he had used it. Later on that same day, Jaeol had a sparring session with Ben, who told him that he had performed really well during their match this time around. Ben also mentioned that if Jaeol had failed to block that middle kick from earlier in the fight, things could have turned dangerous very quickly. Ben then noticed that Jaeol was writing something down in his diary, which prompted him to ask what exactly Jaeol was putting down on paper. Jaeol explained that he felt it was necessary for him to write down everything he felt and sensed immediately after a fight was over, because otherwise he would end up forgetting all of those important details. Ben responded by laughing it off and commenting that Jaeol was truly one of the most diligent people he had ever come across. However, Kyle walked away from the situation with the thought in his mind that simply being diligent was not going to be enough to succeed, and Dave was not entirely sure what specific skills Jaeol was actually trying to improve upon. Kyle then came to the conclusion that he was going to need to stay at that location for at least 2 more days in order to be able to leave with his reputation still fully intact. The next day, Jaeol managed to increase his level into a B+ MMA fighter. Jaeol then struggled with continuous failures as he has always done. He focused on using punching setup as the basic, but it didn't work out well. This time, he tried to start with a tackle, an attempt that requires a certain amount of surrender because it encourages the opponent to dominate him. Jaeol then managed to do an uppercut on his virtual enemy. Despite that, the virtual opponent managed to tackle down Jaeol on the ground and he has lost 69 times in the second challenge mission. Despite losing, Jaeol thinks that now he knows how to do boxing, kick, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and if he does a fake, he will be able to dominate his opponent. Later, Jaeol is sparring with Kyle and he managed to kick him. Jaeol came to the understanding that if he were to allow himself to become insecure about his low level and started avoiding fights in a certain MMA area, it would become extremely difficult, and perhaps even completely impossible, for him to ever successfully dominate any of his opponents in a real match. The sparring session then continued on, with Jaeol putting on an absolutely amazing performance throughout the entire match, and both of them ultimately ended up finishing in a tie with neither one gaining an advantage over the other. Kyle, on the other hand, realized that he had completely lost himself in his own thoughts about how tomorrow was supposed to be his final day at that location, and because of that distraction, he had lost his focus entirely during the session. Following that, Jaeol went ahead and continued working through his challenge in the virtual world, and he ended up losing every single one of his first 91 attempts, even after trying out a wide variety of different moves and strategies throughout each of those failed runs. However, during his 98th attempt, Jaeol managed to beat his virtual opponent so thoroughly and so decisively that he ultimately came out as the winner of the match by a significant margin. The very next day, Kyle walked over to where Jaeol was and let him know that the current day was going to be the last day that they would be practicing alongside him. Kyle went on to explain that they had a number of urgent upcoming matches that they still needed to prepare for, and since they had not even managed to get a single WFC debut match booked for themselves yet, he did not feel that it was right or reasonable for them to continue spending their valuable time training at that location any longer. Jaeol slips every single one of Ben's punches cleanly, reading each attack before it even fully develops. The moment Ben commits to a strike, Jaeol is already moving into a clinch. The American does not see it coming at all and finds himself struggling to deal with the Korean's attacks from the inside. Even Kyle, watching from the side, has to admit that the clinch work is genuinely impressive. He notices that Jaeol's distance management has gotten sharply better too. He wonders out loud why Jaeol was not doing any of this before. But then he brushes it off, thinking the kid still has very few matches behind him and that means very little real experience. Jaeol then takes Ben's attack to the ground and Ben does not like the feeling of it at all. Something is different and he can sense it even if he cannot name it yet. It feels like Jaeol has been holding back this whole time. After eating a flurry of punches and waiting patiently through them, Jaeol picks his moment. The second Ben winds up for a backhand, Jaeol blocks it and locks him into a choke. Ben taps out and once he gets his breath back, Ben asks what just happened. He wants to know when Jaeol learned that and what his secret is. Jaeol tells him simply that he was meditating and had a moment of clarity. Kyle cannot believe what he just heard. He decides his younger brother must want to stay in Korea so badly that he agreed to lose on purpose and tells Ben he will figure it out himself eventually. Kyle finds himself caught between two possibilities: either this newcomer has simply been riding along on a lucky streak, or something real and significant has actually taken place and changed things. He makes it clear to Jaeol that this time around he is not holding anything back whatsoever and that the days of going easy are completely over. Jaeol calmly responds by telling him that he is fully rested and ready and encourages Kyle to step up and show him everything he actually has to offer. Kyle does exactly that and steps forward to engage. There is a certain truth about a fighter that reveals itself just by watching his shoulders, as they carry the story of his wrestling ability and raw physical strength without him ever having to say a word, and what Kyle is carrying in his is impossible to overlook or ignore. But the very moment the two of them make contact with each other, something hits Kyle like a wall and stops him completely cold in his tracks. The person standing across from him is simply not the same person he had been looking at just the day before. The weight behind Jaeol's movements feels entirely different from what it was. While Kyle is still in the middle of trying to wrap his head around what he is sensing and experiencing, Jaeol catches him cleanly with a calf kick that lands with sharp precision. A Brazilian kick follows up immediately right after it without even the slightest pause in between. From that point forward, things begin going very badly for Kyle at a remarkably fast pace. He finds that he does not recognize the opponent standing in front of him in the slightest, as if he is facing a completely different fighter entirely. Even the punches alone are impressive and complex enough to make any serious observer to stop everything and take the time to study them more carefully. However, Kyle knows he needs to turn things around before he absorbs too much damage. Jael has been shutting everything down with the clinch and Kyle has had enough of it. He breaks the clinch and tries to open up the distance, but he walks straight into a kick the moment he does. He then thinks that if the kid wants to play this way, he will play it his way. But first Kyle has to do something about that clinch. Jael is running the same pattern he used against Ben, and it is working just as well. Jael lands a clean combination to the body and Kyle genuinely cannot understand how a person changes this completely overnight. He decides it is time to end it and he manages to catch Jael's leg mid-kick, but Jael slips out of the grip before Kyle can do anything with it, which Kyle was not prepared for at all. If that kick had landed cleanly, Kyle would already be on the floor. Jael owns the medium and long range entirely. Kyle decides to forget the hands and just take the fight to the ground. The attempt falls apart immediately, and Jael's attack is too sharp and too heavy. Kyle finds what he thinks is a clean opening and goes for it, completely sure he has his opponent caught. Jael turns it around on him anyway. Ben watches from the side with his mouth open. Jael reaches down and offers Kyle his hand, asking if he is alright. Kyle jokes that Jael clearly feels very sorry for him. Jael tells him he passed out. Kyle laughs and admits it was a good session, better than he expected. Then he points out that the two of them have been winning all week. However, Jael does not agree with that framing. He says the victory belongs to whoever wins the last fight. Kyle asks if he is serious. Jael is completely serious. He just beat both brothers and says sparring should be treated like a real fight, not gone through at half-effort. When the two of them step back into a real octagon and look across at their opponents, they need to know they came here and put everything in. Kyle thinks about it and decides Jael is right and he agrees to keep training together. Meanwhile, the physical conditioning team has been running their own calculations. Jael has not stopped training, and they want to bring Daejeon's fight weight down to 97 kilograms, which means cutting 12 kilos. Dolce is confident it can be done. The only concern is that the weight tends to come back, but he has something that can handle that. It is banned in the WFC but completely legal in Korea. Even if the weight difference on fight night ends up being more than 10 kilos, Daejeon will step into the ring in a higher weight class than he is in now. It will not matter. Word reaches Daejeon that two foreign fighters were seen leaving Jael's gym. He recognizes the brothers immediately and thinks that everyone in the game knows who they are. A lot of people consider them the future of their weight class. Only an idiot would not put it together that they were there to spar with Jael, and Daejeon is not happy about it. He tells his team it is time to get started. Dolce reminds him that weight management takes patience. Daejeon tells him he does not have time for that, and he is not cutting weight. After a short pause, Dolce comes up with a different approach, and he will work on raising Daejeon's red blood cell concentration instead. At the press conference, Jael steps in composed and ready for anything. Daejeon arrives shortly after with his team around him, and Jael cannot help but notice that the man has genuinely gotten himself into shape. The conference gets underway and a martial arts magazine journalist opens by noting that RFC is shaping up to be the biggest event in the promotion's history. He asks Jael about the reports of training with foreign fighters. Jael confirms it without hesitation. He has been sparring with middleweights and WFC fighters, specifically the brothers, to prepare for the match. The same question goes to Daejeon, asking who he has been training with. Daejeon shuts it down immediately and says that he is not sharing his strategy before a fight. Someone in the room says that his opponent just answered without blinking and that Daejeon is behaving like a child. Jael spots two people whispering in the back row and invites them to ask their questions properly instead of wasting everyone's time. A woman steps forward and says she respects Daejeon's decision not to reveal his training setup, but notes that his opponent did it without any hesitation. She asks Daejeon to comment on Jael's nickname, cold as a glacier, and whether he thinks that still applies given how openly he has been talking. Then she adds that Jael's sparring partners came all the way from America, which she finds interesting. Daejeon takes the microphone. He says that for a fighter with a match coming up, naming your sparring partners is the same as handing over your game plan. He believes preparation and strategy are equally important and that going on about his friends from the States would be shooting himself in the foot. Then he goes further. He says he thinks Jael cares more about popularity than fighting. The TV appearances, the drama at press conferences, it is like some presence that follows Daejeon around and exists purely to stop him from focusing. How long do you think it will take for Jael to prove he's more than just a lucky rookie and earn his shot at the title? Comment Outcast if you'd like a part 2 of the series. Make sure to like and subscribe the channel for more sports manhwa recaps.